Chapter 4355. Yu took the drawing board and picked up the charcoal pencil. First, he casually sketched a few lines on the sketch pad. Romanka was surprised to find that his casual sketching skills were not worse than a master-level sketch. Some people say that people with multiple personalities are born crazy artists. Many people with multiple personalities like to draw. Perhaps this has something to do with their delicate and sensitive feelings? Alice agreed and said, "Without a delicate heart, how can one become an artist? Many times when people think of artists, they think of lunatics." It's not that they're lunatics. It's just that they have stronger and more persistent willpower than ordinary people, and there's room for imagination. Then the few of them remained silent, leaving Yu some peace and quiet. Yu held the charcoal pencil and drew quietly. Because it was a sketch, he quickly sketched out Shanshan's appearance. Gongjie and Alice were surprised when they saw it. Romanka might not be able to recognize it because he had never interacted with Yun Shirshir, but Alice and Gongjie were very familiar with it. This was probably how Yun Shirshir looked when she was a young girl. "My sister must have looked like this when she was in her teens." Alice also nodded. "Why? Do you know this person?" Romanka saw their strange expressions and could not help but ask, "What's going on?" Alice asked doubtfully. This girl, not only her facial features, but also her demeanor, are exactly the same as Yu's mother. "Oh." Romanka nodded and took the drawing board from Yu's hand. He said bluntly, "I've read the dossier. According to my analysis, the scene of his mother being bullied when he was young must have been stuck in the depths of his mind. Therefore, the origin of his personality is probably based on his mother when she was young. That is to say, when he was young, those nightmarish experiences couldn't be forgotten. That's why such a situation occurred." After a pause, he turned his head and asked, "Besides Gong Fan and this girl, did you see anyone else?" Alice clenched her fists nervously. She did not want Yu to tell anyone else. However, Yu said calmly, "I also saw a man." "A man?" "Yes, he's very tall, 8 meters. He chased me before." "Chase?" "I remember that when I was conscious and paced around the hospital, this man had been following me silently. At first, I saw a black shadow and thought it was Gong Fan. When I got closer, I realized that this man was very tall and slender. Gong Fan also met him on the rooftop. He said that this man seemed to have a murderous aura." "Killing intent?" "I don't think this man is that simple. I couldn't tell if it was dangerous or not, but it didn't give me a good feeling. He seems to be looking for us." "You think he's looking for you? Then what do you think his goal is, to find you and chase you?" Yu was a little confused. "How can I know what he's thinking? But he gave me a strange feeling. I can't tell if he has good intentions or bad intentions. Anyway, we've been avoiding him." "Before you woke up, do you remember where you were?" Chapter 4356. As Yu spoke, he felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his temples and looked at Romanka with a perplexed expression. "What should I do?" "Rest for a while. Come out for dinner later. You should be hungry." Yu nodded. He covered himself with the blanket and lay on the bed. Lisa stayed behind to take care of him. The rest of them left the room. Romanka and Alice walked to the corridor. Their expressions were complicated. Romanka looked at Alice but did not say anything. "Professor, what do you think of Yu's current situation?" "Actually, Yu was forced into this world by the outside world. I gathered all the personalities together. According to the information provided by Yu, there is a girl named Shan. She is 15 or 16 years old. Her personality is similar to his mother, Yun Shirshir. She is gentle but tenacious. There is a mysterious man. His appearance is unknown. He is 8 meters tall. His origin is unknown. There is also a girl named Ran. I heard from Shan, but she has not appeared yet. I don't know if she really exists in the world of the personalities. Currently, the known personalities including Gong Fan are these. So what should we do next?" Alice felt sorry for Yu. "Professor, let's be frank. I agree with your treatment plan. So far, this treatment plan is the least harmful to Yu. However, his mental state doesn't seem to be optimistic. Should we continue with this?" Romanka turned around and looked at her deeply. He raised his eyebrows disapprovingly. What else can we do? If we don't continue with this treatment, will the treatment be stopped? My heart aches for him. Alice frowned, especially when she thought of Yu's frightening expression when he woke up. It was as if he had just escaped from a nightmare. Now he had to enter the same dream again and again. Romanka sighed. What else can we do? You need to know that Yu's current situation is not looking good. Plus, you need to treat her conservatively. This means that the adverse effects of conservative treatment will last for a long time. Of course, you can rest assured that I will pay attention to his situation at all times. If the situation is not optimistic, I will not enforce this plan. All right. Alice was at her wit's end. Other than the treatment plan planned by Professor Romanka, she really couldn't come up with any other plans. When Yu woke up, it was a sunny day. Compared to the gloomy days in the other world, the warm sunshine in the real world made him yearn for it. After dinner, he suggested that he wanted to go out for a walk. Lisa said that she wanted to accompany him, but Yu said that he wanted to have a quiet walk by himself. Lisa could not let him be alone, so she followed behind him from afar. Just as Yu left, Hua Jin received a video call from Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir's wound was slowly healing. As the wound was very deep, she was still unable to get out of bed and walk around freely. In the video call, she was still wearing the hospital gown. However, under Muyaja's meticulous care, she looked much better. Where's Yu? Chapter 4357. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she asked tentatively, Is he okay? Hua Jin was a little hesitant. I'm not sure about Yu's condition because I don't know much about this. Professor Romanka has come up with a plan for Yu. If it goes according to the plan, there shouldn't be any problems. Oh, I see. Yun Shirshir was obviously relieved. She pleaded again. Hua Jin, when I'm not around, you have to take good care of Yu. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep well. You're the one I trust the most. You know how to take care of people. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Yu and Natalia. Hua Jin promised again. Yun Shirshir was relieved. If Yu comes back, tell him that I'll go over to accompany him after I've recovered. Okay, I won't forget. After hanging up the phone, Hua Jin looked a little worried. Yu's condition wasn't very optimistic. This was what Romanka had said. However, at this point he could only comfort Yun Shirshir. Otherwise, if she heard that Yu's condition wasn't optimistic, she would definitely rush over anxiously. Given her condition, her wound hadn't healed yet. It must be too much for her. Now he could only comfort her for the time being. They could talk about the rest after she recovered. On the beach. Yu sat on the beach. The waves came over layer by layer. Unknowingly, his toes were covered with fine sand. Lisa stared at him for a while. Finally, she walked over slowly and carefully sat down a few meters away from him. Yu knew that she was secretly protecting him. He smiled and said without turning his head, Aren't you going to sit closer? Didn't you say that you wanted to take a quiet walk by yourself? I only said that I wanted to walk around in peace. I didn't say that I just wanted to sit alone in peace. Lisa blushed when she heard that. Hence she moved closer to him. Yu stared fixedly at the distant horizon and blurted out, This planet has an area of 360 million square kilometers, which makes up 71.8% of Earth's surface area. The sea seemed endless, but in reality, it was just a thin layer of blue clothing covering the surface of the Earth. Earth was not the largest planet in terms of size. It was just a part of the solar system. The solar system was so big, but compared to the Milky Way it was nothing. The Milky Way is all-encompassing, but beyond the Milky Way, there are too many places that humans dare not imagine. Lisa was confused when she heard Yu's words. She did not understand what Yu was trying to say. Yu turned to look at her and smiled. Actually, in the second you breathe, a few lives are lost. Life forms are too small compared to the whole world. Yeah. So, if humans want to evolve or even surpass nature, they have to evolve. Looking at the history of human evolution, the survival of the fittest, the only ones left are the strong ones. Actually, humans don't have fangs, claws, or the sensitive sense of smell and hearing of dogs. They also don't have the eyesight of an eagle. But humans rely on their super strong brains to stand at the top of the food chain on this planet. Yeah. Chapter 4358. Yu smirked. To me, the human brain is the scariest thing on this planet. Based on what we know, the structure of the brain is the Milky Way. In fact, the potential of the brain is not as simple as the Milky Way. Do you know that sometimes you can't even control your own brain to think about something? Humans can't even control themselves. They can't be like other creatures and do whatever they want. For example, when you're sad, you don't want to think about sad things, but you can't help but think about it. Don't you think that's a scary thing? Don't think too much. Lisa knew what he was worried about. Yu laughed helplessly. He stood up and patted the sand off his butt. Get up, let's go back. Will the sun hurt if we don't continue to bask in the sun? If we bask in the sun for too long, we'll get sunburned. Lisa got up and followed Yu back to the medical center. When Professor Romanka saw that he had returned, he immediately summoned him alone. Yu followed him to the medical room. Seeing that Alice was not around, he asked in a low voice, "What are the chances of Gongfan's personality and mine fusing?" Very high. How high is very high? There's no accurate data on this. If there's no accident, the two of you can definitely fuse. After all, you're willing to accept him and he's willing to accept you. There's no problem with the fusion. Yu was silent for a while. What do you mean by accident? Didn't I say that if he dies in the dream, he'll disappear forever? Why would he disappear? Yu was not convinced. He's a personality that I created. Why would he disappear? If I didn't allow him to disappear, would he disappear? The personality was controlled by the brain. If he couldn't even control his own brain, Yu would definitely feel indignant. Romanka glanced at him. Do you know why people suffer from depression? Because people can't control their nerves at all. There were thousands and thousands of sensors in a human sensory system. Even if there was a mistake in the most important part, there was no way for the human body to repair it. He could no longer be naturally happy or naturally sad. Even sleeping normally had become his biggest problem. Actually, why don't you think about it? Is the person controlling the brain? Or is the brain controlling the body? What you mean is that humans are just parasites that live in this body and accept the control of the brain. I didn't say that. Romanka carried Yu to the monitoring chair and put on a brain imaging helmet for him. Man is neither a parasite nor a god who controls the brain. Just like how humans will never be able to dominate the world. Why? Haven't humans already dominated this world? If the world you're talking about refers to Earth, then I can also break your fallacy. So far, man has not completely conquered nature. Humans have invented so many remarkable technologies, but why can't they prevent natural disasters? Hearing this, Yu was momentarily speechless. He didn't know how to answer this question. Chapter 43:59. Romanka turned on the device and said, "Lie down. I'll monitor the activity of the personality in your brain. If I leave that world, will I still be in the body in that world? I'm not an encyclopedia of multiple personality worlds. I don't know everything. I only know that the main personality won't disappear, but I can't say that I'm 100% sure about this." Romanka continued. "The next time you sleep and enter that world, everything will be revealed. Actually, my suggestion is that before you enter that world, you should first have a full sleep to replenish your mental strength." "No need," Yu said stubbornly. "I'm not tired." Romanka looked at the brain imaging displayed on the screen, but he didn't expose his excuse. Not tired. He was just a child. How long could he last? No one knew. But there was no doubt that his mental state was already very bad. Romanka did not say anything else. After the brain imaging test, Yu could not understand the imaging. He asked curiously, "What should I do the next time I enter that world?" "I think that the activity on the surface of your brain is still very high. This means that the personality living in your body has not fully emerged. You can explore more in that world while protecting your own safety." Explore. Yu did not think much of it. That's too risky. The truth always comes with risks. Yu nodded. "Okay, I got it." After evening, Yu went to bed early. Romanka had prescribed a lot of medicine for him. When Alice brought it over, Yu looked at the colorful pills in the box with a frown. Obviously, he was not very willing. "There's no choice. This one is for calming the nerves. This one is for helping you sleep. This one is for..." Yu pursed his lips. Okay, don't say anymore. I'll just eat them all. That's a good boy. Alice smiled. Eat them one by one. They'll help with your absorption. Yu followed Alice's instructions and took the pills one by one. Lying on the bed, Alice came over and said, "Do you want me, this beautiful sister, to tell you a bedtime story?" No. Alice was greatly frustrated. Why? Your mommy has repeatedly told me to tell you bedtime stories. I'm not a kid anymore. Tell me the truth. Do you dislike me? Yes. Yu waved her hand. What if I have nightmares when I look at your face? Alice almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What? My beautiful face actually gave you nightmares? She was heartbroken. Yu was finally amused by her. Okay, Auntie Alice is the most beautiful, okay? It was rare to hear Yu praise her. Alice was satisfied. She tucked Yu in and said gently, "Sleep early, okay?" She bent down and kissed him gently on the forehead. This is a good night kiss on behalf of your mommy. Good boy. Yu smiled. If Alice becomes a mother in the future, she'll definitely be a very gentle mother. I'm afraid you won't have the chance. Chapter 4360. Entering the dream again. Yu opened his eyes and realized that he was lying in the backseat of the car. Seeing that he was awake, Shanshan, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, said happily, "He's awake." Gongfan was driving. He glanced through the rearview mirror and saw that Yu was awake. He relaxed his brows. Yu sat up and asked curiously, "Where am I? You suddenly fainted just now. Did you return to the real world?" Yes. Yu nodded. Because a person's sleep time is limited. Did anything happen after I woke up? No. Shanshan explained. After you fainted, I was very worried. I didn't know what happened to you, but Gongfan said that you were too tired and fainted. He carried you and followed the road to find the car. He said that he drove the car to this hospital. Yu sat up. Where are we going now? I heard him say that we're going home. Home? Yu was confused. Where are we going? Back to where I was before. Gongfan explained, and Yu did not ask any further after hearing that. He was surprised to see Gongfan controlling the steering wheel so easily. Do you know how to drive? A little. When did you learn? Did Xiaoichen teach you? Gongfan smiled. I think this car is no different from a go-kart. Oh please. There was still a huge and obvious difference, okay? However, at such a tense moment, Gongfan's words made him feel much more relaxed. Gongfan did not know the road. He did not know how far they had gone. Fortunately, he had filled the car with gas. Hence, he was not afraid of being stranded halfway. After going around in circles, they still returned to the original junction. However, there were only 3 forks in the road. Since he had taken 2 wrong paths, the last one must be the way to the manor. Gongfan stepped on the accelerator without hesitation. 10 minutes later, the car arrived at the entrance of the manor. Gongfan parked the car in the garage and the 3 of them got out of the car. When Shanshan saw such a huge manor, she was stunned. What a luxurious manor. Gongfan, is this really your home? Yu was also in disbelief. She never thought that there would be such a luxurious manor in this world. It was really amazing. It was as luxurious as a manor in the real world. Yu remembered that she had gone to a winery with Muyaja before. It seemed to be a manor like this one. It was very big. Just the back garden alone took up 10 acres of land. Gongfan didn't know how to explain it. Just like how Shanshan couldn't explain why she had been in the same hospital since she was conscious. Ever since he was conscious, he had been living in a manor like this. During normal times, he lived in this manor step by step, and did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. It's here. Let's go in. Normally, no one would be able to discover this place. As Gongfan spoke, he walked to the door. However, he realized that the door was ajar and not closed. He remembered that he had closed the door before he left. What was going on? Gongfan looked around in confusion. For some reason, the sky in this world was always gloomy. The bleak scenery always seemed lifeless. It was no wonder that he was so attached to the sunlight in the real world. Chapter 4361. This was the place where he used to live. It was always cloudy and had lost the sunlight for many years. The trees in the back garden were all withered and looked extremely bleak. This seemed to be a scene that could only be seen in the middle of winter. What's wrong? Yu saw that he was stunned and was a little puzzled. Gongfan shook his head. Nothing. Let's go in. Yu and Shanshan followed behind him and walked in. After walking into the manor, Yu realized how luxurious the interior of the manor was. The American-style furniture was made of solid wood, the fireplace, the rocking chair. What was puzzling was that even though Gongfan lived here alone, no one cleaned the place, but there was no dust. It's so clean. Yu turned around and asked Gongfan, "Can I take a look around?" Of course. Perhaps it was because he was in a safe environment, Yu let down his guard. In addition, he was curious about Gongfan's residence, so he looked around. Shanshan was also very interested. Hence, she followed behind Yu and looked around room by room. The manor was very big. There were a total of 3 rows of buildings. The layout was similar to that of the hospital, which was a C-shaped structure. Yu held the stairs and walked up. Looking at the magnificent furnishings, his sighs kept echoing. Wow, it's so beautiful. Look that mural. This mural is so beautiful too. The voices gradually faded away with the sound of footsteps. Gongfan went up to the 2nd floor and returned to his room. He was thinking about how he should rest since it was already so late. His room was very big. Gongfan walked in and wanted to change his clothes first. After carrying Yu all the way, it was inevitable that he was sweating. He was such a clean freak, how could he tolerate it? Hence, he wanted to find a clean set of clothes to change into after taking a shower. However, just as he entered the room, Gongfan caught a glimpse of the furnishings on the table and couldn't help but frown. It was very strange. There was an ancient bronze ornament of a little angel on the table. He had the habit of tidying it up. Perhaps it was OCD, but he remembered that before he left, the ornament on the table was facing the window. Now that he looked at it again, it was obviously moved silently. It was obvious that someone had casually picked up the ornament, looked at it, and then put it back in its original position. How could this be? Gongfan immediately became nervous. Could it be that someone had been here? That was impossible. He was the only one living in this manor. Usually, no one would come here, and no one would enter or leave his room. Could it be that someone had come in when he left? Gongfan looked around warily, trying to find some clues. He walked to the side of the bed, but he didn't find anything strange. However, it was a fact that the ornaments on the table had been moved. Gongfan had a bad premonition. He turned and looked at the wardrobe. There was a row of large cloakrooms in his room. At this moment, that row of wardrobes became his main suspect. He suspected that someone had come in and out of the room. Then this person wanted to search for something in the room and came to his room. Before he could find anything, he heard the sound of them coming back, so he found a place to hide. Gongfan's gaze landed on the wardrobe. He clenched his fists and slowly walked over. Chapter 4362. He purposely lightened his footsteps, obviously suspecting that someone was hiding in the cupboard. He was afraid that the sound of his footsteps would alarm that person. Who could it be? If it wasn't for his usual attentiveness, he wouldn't have noticed that someone had entered his room and let his guard down. Then, who was the person who entered and left the manor? Gongfan was suspicious of the large number of cupboard doors, but he obviously noticed that the doors of the cupboard were half closed. This made him even more vigilant. Usually, he had obsessive-compulsive disorder. No matter if it was the drawers or the door, the cupboard or the ornaments, they must all be returned to their original positions, especially the cupboard doors and the room doors. He didn't like the feeling that there was a gap between the door and the cupboard. That narrow gap always left endless space for one's imagination. One night, when he was about to go to sleep, he realized that the door wasn't closed tightly. Through the gap in the door, he could see the direction of the corridor. He had a feeling that through the gap, there would be a dark shadow groping towards his door. Hence, he always had the habit of locking the door and windows before going to bed. Similarly, he did the same for the cupboard door. Gongfan's hand gripped the handle of the cupboard door tightly and pulled it open. In the cupboard there were layers upon layers of clothes, but he didn't find anything strange. Gongfan's heart was filled with doubts, but he clearly heard hurried footsteps coming from behind him. He turned around abruptly, but before he could see clearly who it was, he was violently pushed to the ground by the black shadow. Before Gong Fan could react, he was pushed to the ground and his neck was tightly gripped by a pair of hands. Cough, 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 cough. That pair of hands were gripped so tightly that he almost couldn't breathe normally. Gong Fan looked at the person who had pounced on him. Even with the back of the light, he could faintly see that this was a youth who was a few years older than him. Because of the back of the light, he couldn't see the youth's face clearly, but he could vaguely see the outline of his facial features. It was so unfamiliar he had never seen it before. However, such a dangerous aura. Such a murderous aura. Gong Fan suddenly thought of a dream. Of the youth who chased after him relentlessly. In that dream, that youth didn't look like this. He looked very similar to Yu, but that scarlet gaze, that gaze that clearly wanted to kill him, was exactly the same as the gaze of the youth who had pounced on him now. It's you. Gong Fan made a rare sound. Because his throat was being choked, he was almost suffocating. The blood in his brain flowed backward to the top of his head. The feeling of suffocation made him subconsciously counterattack. He swung his fists at the young man's face, punching him repeatedly. Cough. The youth's grip had obviously increased in strength, and the feeling of suffocation was like a wave crashing over him, causing him to feel dizzy and disoriented. Gong Fan's consciousness gradually blurred. His face flushed red and all the strength in his body seemed to have frozen. There was a huge disparity in physique. He was obviously no match for him. No matter how hard he tried to reach out and punch the young man, he felt that his fists didn't hurt or tickle the young man's body. Who are you? Could this also be Yu's dangerous personality? Was he also the one who attacked Yun Shirshir that night? At the thought of this, Gong Fan's heart was filled with rage. Chapter 4363. He kept coughing and pressed the youth onto the ground. Before he could punch him, the youth pushed him away, stood up and kicked him. I'll kill you, I'll kill you. The youth used his feet to kick him fiercely. Even though they were not in the real world, the pain was still so clear and distinct. Gong Fan subconsciously wanted to protect himself. He arched his body and dodged, but the youth's eyes were red with anger. He grabbed his collar again and lifted him up with an unknown strength. At this point, Gong Fan's feet were already in the air. He kicked weakly. As he was suspended in the air, he did not have any fulcrum to support himself. The youth lifted him up. What kind of strength was that? There was no doubt that the person standing in front of him was a very strong opponent. Gong Fan's hands clasped his throat tightly. Unknowingly, a sentence from Alice appeared in his mind. If you meet with any accident in that world, in the real world, it would mean the death of your personality. He could no longer sit still and wait for death. Gong Fan stretched out his leg fiercely and used his last bit of strength to kick his vital part. The youth groaned in pain and his hands finally let go of him. He staggered backwards and bent his waist. His gaze was even more sinister. Gong Fan leaned against the wall and was released from his grip. He greedily took in big mouthfuls of air. Huff, huff, huff. He staggered up from the ground and was determined to fight to the death with this youth in front of him. The youth was about to go forward when he saw the ornament on the table from the corner of his eye. Hence, he ran towards the table and grabbed the ornament on the table. Holding it tightly in his hands, he turned around and rushed towards Gong Fan. Together with his colleague, he raised the bronze ornament in his hands high up. The sharpest part of the ornament smashed towards his head. Gong Fan dodged and retreated. The youth missed and hit the window behind him. The window instantly broke. At the same time, Yu, who was strolling on the third floor, suddenly heard a sound coming from downstairs and was shocked. What's going on? He looked at Shan Shan. Shan Shan could not help but say nervously, I heard it. Seems like the sound of the window breaking. Just now, she heard hurried footsteps downstairs, but she thought it was Gong Fan walking around, so she did not care. Did something happen? Shan Shan shook her head. Yu immediately said, Stay here and don't move. I'll go downstairs and take a look. No, I'll go with you. This is too dangerous. Yu reminded her. Stay here and don't move around, okay? Oh, then you must be careful. Okay. Remember to lock the door after I leave. Alright, I got it. Yu turned and left the room. Shan Shan watched him go downstairs before carefully locking the door. Yu rushed down the stairs. At the same time in the room, Gong Fan and the young man were still in a tense confrontation. The youth picked up the ornament in his hand and threw it at Gong Fan. Gong Fan wanted to dodge, but he was tripped by the carpet under his feet and fell forward. His forehead hit the corner of the cupboard, and his brain shook violently. Immediately after, he felt a sharp pain and numbness at the corner of his forehead, as if some sticky liquid was flowing out. He held his forehead, and his vision started to blur. Chapter 43-64. Yu heard the sound and ran to the door. When he saw the young man closing in on Gong Fan, he immediately shouted, "Who are you?" When the young man heard Yu's voice, he turned around abruptly. When he saw that it was Yu, he looked back as if he was trying to identify the person he was looking for. Yu shouted sternly, "What on earth are you trying to do?" The young man was stunned. Then his face turned gloomy. Yu looked at Gong Fan and saw that he was injured. Just as he was about to go over to him, Gong Fan shouted, "Run!" Just as Gong Fan finished speaking, the young man pounced on Yu. When Gong Fan saw this, he did not care about his dizziness. He did not know where he got the remaining strength from, but he pounced over and hugged the young man's leg tightly. The young man did not expect him to be so bold. He was caught off guard and tripped on the ground. The young man turned around with a fierce gaze. "You're courting death." As he spoke, his fists landed on Gong Fan's body like raindrops. When Yu saw this, he was anxious. However, he knew that he was no match for this young man. Hence, he said to the young man, "Be ****, come at me if you dare." The young man's attention was attracted by Yu, and he turned around. At this moment, Gong Fan was already exhausted. His head was dizzy and he fell to the ground weakly. Yu turned around and ran, attracting all the young man's attention. The young man stood up, kicked Gong Fan aside and chased after Yu. Yu ran up to the 4th floor in one breath. The young man chased after him. He ran extremely fast and caught up with him in a short while. Yu hid in a room and locked the door. He leaned against the door and tried his best to suppress his breathing. He nervously listened to the movements outside. Outside the door, the young man's footsteps slowly passed by. When he passed by the room Yu was hiding in, he paused for a few seconds. When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but hold her breath. She was worried that the young man would break down the door if he found out. He knew in his heart that he was no match for this young man. The youth paused at the door for a while, then slowly walked away. Hearing the footsteps leaving, Yu still did not dare to act rashly. However, he was still worried about Gong Fan downstairs. He did not know how Gong Fan was doing now. Was it important? He saw that his head was covered in blood just now, and he didn't know if it was serious. Yu leaned against the door with his back against it. It was only when the commotion outside seemed to fade away that he made a decision in his heart. Immediately after opening the door, he rushed towards the room where Gong Fan had collapsed and locked the door from the inside. Yu leaned against the door until he could no longer hear the young man's footsteps. Yu took a deep breath and opened the door. Originally at this moment he should have rushed downstairs. However, for some reason, he glanced in the direction of the young man's footsteps. The young man's back was facing him. Yu opened the door very softly. There was almost no movement. However, for some reason, when he looked at the young man seemed to be able to sense his gaze and suddenly turned around. What kind of gaze was that? That was the gaze of a ferocious beast searching for its prey. Yu instantly felt suffocated. He couldn't care less and turned to run. Behind him, the sound of footsteps chased after him. Yu pounced to the staircase, sat on the handrail, and glided down the stairs suavely. Chapter 43-65. The youth clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes that were filled with hostility slowly narrowed. Yu came to the room where Gong Fan had collapsed. He walked to the door and saw Gong Fan lying on the ground. He turned pale with fright. First, he closed the door and locked it. Then, he rushed over and carried Gong Fan. Gong Fan, are you okay? He suddenly felt a sticky mark on his palm. Yu's heart palpitated. He looked at his palm and saw that it was red. He was bleeding. Yu was worried and patted Gong Fan's face gently. Gong Fan, are you okay? Gong Fan. Gong Fan's eyelids fluttered and he finally opened his eyes. When he saw Yu's face, he recognized him as the youth because his vision was blurry. He was nervous and instinctively put up a defensive posture. It's me. Yu revealed his identity. Gong Fan was relieved. It's good that you're okay. Don't worry. How could anything happen to me? How about you? Do you feel better? Yu was extremely worried. The sticky mark on his palm made his heart beat wildly. Nothing must happen to him. What happened? Who is that person? Gong Fan licked his dry lips and said weakly, I don't know. When I returned to my room, he suddenly appeared. Yu frowned. Maybe, he sneaked into this manor after I left. I suspect that he's the one who stabbed Mommy. You have to be careful. Yu nodded and hugged him tightly. Gong Fan, nothing must happen to you. I don't want anything to happen to you. Gong Fan chuckled. Idiot, I'm just a little dizzy from hitting my head. I won't die. Really? Yu was skeptical of his words. Gong Fan looked at his worried expression and smiled in pain. It's just a small injury. Don't worry too much. Maybe I'll feel better after lying down for a while. Look at the wound on my forehead. Is it still bleeding? It's gone. Then it's fine. You don't have to worry. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried. Yu hugged Gong Fan and was thinking about the background of this young man when she suddenly heard Shanshan's hysterical scream through the window. Then there was the sound of something heavy crashing. Yu was shocked when he heard that. Gong Fan grabbed his collar nervously and asked, Where's Shanshan? Shanshan is here. Oh no. Gong Fan immediately became alert. Don't tell me you left Shanshan alone downstairs? I'll go look for her right now. What about you? What about you? Gong Fan struggled to stand up. When Yu saw this, she helped him to the bed and said, Take a rest first. I'll go downstairs to check on the situation. No, it's too dangerous. It's fine. Yu said. Alice said that even if something happens to me in this world, I'm the main personality. I'll never disappear. Okay. Don't worry. After you rest for a while, come downstairs and meet me. Gong Fan nodded. I got it. Be careful. Yu stood up, opened the door and walked out. He looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he boldly rushed downstairs. Chapter 4366. Shanshan. He screamed and rushed to the door, facing the direction of the door. San was lying flat on the ground, her chest rising and falling rapidly. In the position of her chest, there was a sharp candlestick inserted upside down. The candle on the candlestick had been thrown to one side, and the sharp end of the candlestick was stuck in her chest. Shanshan held the candlestick with both hands, her eyes wide open. She kept taking deep breaths, but blood kept flowing out from the corner of her mouth. Yu felt like his heart was being cut by a knife. Especially when he saw Shanshan in such a pitiful state. He felt both vexed and heartbroken. He walked to her side, but he didn't know what to do with his hands. He didn't know if he should touch her. Shanshan, what's wrong? Shanshan looked at him with her eyes wide open. She kept spitting out mouthful after mouthful of blood. Bean-sized teardrops kept flowing from the corners of her eyes and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Her blood-stained hand trembled as she grabbed Yu's sleeve. Yu. Shanshan? Sob, 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 it hurts, it hurts. Shanshan was in so much pain that she started crying. She kept crying and choked on the blood from time to time. Yu's gaze slowly moved to where she was injured. When he saw where the candlestick had pierced, he knew that the candlestick had pierced her vitals. He couldn't care less anymore. He sadly picked up Shanshan and hugged her in his arms. Don't cry, don't cry. I'm here with you. Shanshan was after all a 15 or 16-year-old girl. Under such pain, her whole body trembled and she couldn't stop crying. It hurts, it hurts. Sob, 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 sob. It hurts. When Yu heard this, his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. He hugged her tightly and felt that her body was getting colder and colder because of the excessive blood loss. Am I going to die? Shanshan hugged Yu's arm reluctantly as tears blurred her eyes. Yu forced a smile. How can that be? Don't worry, you won't die. I promise you I won't let you die. But I'm in so much pain, what should I do? Even if a person's vitals were pierced, they wouldn't die instantly. Under the condition of excessive blood loss, they would face a long period of pain. Shanshan's eyes widened and she kept sucking in cold air, as if this was the only way to calm the pain. Yu was so sad that he was suffocating. How could this be? He couldn't tell if he was in a dream or in reality or somewhere else. He didn't understand why he had to go through this. It must be that young man. Why would he do such a thing? Why would he do such a cruel thing? He didn't understand. What he didn't understand was whether he was the one controlling the plot, or whether it was the brain that was controlling them. As for him, the only difference between him and these personalities was that he was the main personality. This was determined from birth, and no one could shake his position. Otherwise, how would he be any different from these personalities? Yu. In his arms, the girl's breathing calmed down. It was a strange kind of smoothness. It was as if she knew that she was not far from death and she couldn't escape from it. Yu lowered his head. Shanshan was looking at him deeply. My name is Liang Yishan. Liang Yishan? Don't forget me, okay? Even if I can't live, I want to live in your heart. Chapter 4367. Yu's heart ached as he hugged her tightly. Shanshan used the last of her strength to say to Yu, when I'm not around you have to become stronger, braver. Oh. Yu held her hand tightly as his vision became blurry. Gradually, Shanshan's hand fell from his palm powerlessly. There was a loud bang as if something had exploded in his head. He finally understood. Behind him, he heard the sound of footsteps. Yu let go of Shanshan and carefully placed her on the floor. He stood up and turned around. At this moment, the young man was already in front of him. The young man was a head taller than him and had a similar face to him. However, they were not exactly alike. Instead, the young man's facial features were filled with ruthlessness. Yu looked at him fearlessly without a trace of fear. When the young man saw him like this, he was slightly surprised. He closed in on him. Why? Not running anymore? Running? Can I run forever? Yu did not retreat. Instead, he took a step closer to the young man. I understand now. Shanshan is one of the personalities in my body. She was timid and afraid. No matter what, she was always careful, hesitant, and worried about personal gains and losses. She represented the weak personality in my body. Now that she's dead, it means that I won't be as weak as before. The young man was slightly stunned and his eyes narrowed. It's you who killed my cowardice. Yu slowly put his hand behind his back. Behind him was a pair of scissors that he had secretly hidden in his waist belt. Just now, when he was strolling around the room, he saw the scissors. Out of self-preservation, he casually put it in his hand. The young man's gaze moved down and landed on him. He laughed coldly. Do you think you're my match? Humph. You overestimate yourself. As he spoke, he strode forward and reached out his hand. He grabbed Yu's throat and lifted him up easily. The young man was so arrogant that even though he knew that Yu had a weapon in his hand, he didn't take him seriously at all. Could it be that this personality represented the violence in his body? It was this personality that had hurt Mommy. Yu accepted this fact and began to struggle violently. However, the youth's strength was too great. Gradually, his feet left the ground. Yu struggled and clenched the scissors in her hand tightly. Then she recklessly stabbed at his arm. The youngster glanced at Yu from the corner of his eye. He raised his other hand and effortlessly grabbed Yu's hand. He grabbed Yu's wrist with great force, causing Yu to feel pain. Yu's hand loosened, and the scissors fell to the ground with a thud. I've said it before. No matter how many of you there are, you are no match for me. Perhaps it was due to the anger that Yu had attacked him, but the violence in the youngster's body completely exploded. He threw Yu away with all his might. Yu only felt that his body was as light as a kite. In the end, he landed heavily on the table. He somersaulted and fell to the ground. He curled up in pain. The young man walked in front of him and looked down at him. Then he lifted his leg and kicked him to the side in disdain. Yu had no way of retaliating. Chapter 4368. Are you Yin Tianyu? The youth walked toward him with a sinister smile. How long are you going to occupy this body? Occupy? Yu was so angry that he laughed. What do you mean by occupying? This is my body to begin with. You shouldn't even exist. Oh? Why shouldn't I exist? The youth's eyes were cruel as he yelled hysterically, "Why should you exist but not me? Then, according to what you said, this idiot shouldn't exist either." Yu knew that the idiot the youth was referring to was the dead Liang Yishan. He was even more furious. "You are really unreasonable." The youth closed in on him. "I don't care what you say. I only know that as long as I kill you and everyone else, this body will belong to me." "What makes you think so?" Yu said coldly. "I won't let you have your way." "Won't let me have my way." The youth's face was cold. "I'm not just saying this. You're not as good as me. What do you have to fight me?" As the youth said this, he bent down and pulled out the candlestick from Liang Yishan's body. He then closed in on him. "Go to hell." The young man roared and swung his sword at him. Yu could not retreat in time and could only watch as the candlestick was about to pierce his forehead. When the candlestick was less than an inch away from his forehead, the youth's body stiffened, and his scarlet eyes stopped moving. Yu widened his eyes in shock. Without caring about anything else, he snatched the candlestick from his hand. The youth staggered. He wanted to turn around to check what was going on, but in the next second, his body fell limply to the ground. Behind him, Gong Fan, whose face was covered in blood, panted heavily as he looked at the youth's collapsed figure. He knelt on the ground weakly. At the same time, the vase in his hand fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. "Gong Fan." Yu threw the candlestick aside and rushed toward him to hold his arm. "How are you? Are you all right? Are you all right?" Even now, Gong Fan was still concerned about his safety. "I am fine. How about you? How do you feel?" "Just a little bit of blood. It's fine." Gong Fan was very stubborn, but Yu's heart ached. At this moment, his face was covered in blood, covering his brows and eyes, to the extent that his eyes were dyed red. "Where's Shanshan?" When the two of them arrived in front of Shanshan, Yu realized that Shanshan had already stopped breathing. Her eyes were wide open and there was a hint of reluctance in them. Gong Fan found it hard to believe. He did not know what had happened and only heard a cry of surprise. He did not expect that it was Shanshan who had been attacked. He put his finger under her nose and listened to her pulse, but there was no reaction. Shanshan. For some reason, even though he hadn't spent much time with Shanshan, he still felt a bit of heartache. Yu took a deep breath. Instead of crying, he calmly closed her eyes and hugged her tightly. "Shanshan, I'm sorry. I promise you I'll be braver in the future." Chapter 4369. Unknowingly, Yu's arms had become empty. He was still hugging him, unwilling to come back to his senses. When Gong Fan saw this, he gently held his shoulders and said with difficulty, Let's leave this place first." "Why?" Why are you so cruel?" Yu still felt heartache. Gong Fan couldn't bear it and hugged him tightly. "It's over. Everything will be over." Yu bit his lip and hugged him tightly. "I definitely won't let you disappear like Shanshan." "Okay." Gong Fan replied. "I won't leave your side." The two of them supported each other and left the manor. The night breeze blew. Alice and Gongjie sat in a bar by the beach. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, they looked at the lonely figure sitting on the beach with heartache. Alice sighed. "He seems to have been sitting by the beach for the whole day. I don't know what he's thinking. Ever since he woke up, he hasn't said a word. His eyes are red, but there are no tears. He doesn't answer any of my questions. He's in a daze alone. I don't know what happened." When Gongjie heard this, he raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. Perhaps he was too tired in the dream. He needs to calm down and adjust his state of mind. "Tell me, what kind of dream was it?" Alice was a little anxious. Logically speaking, no matter what happened in the dream, the boy would definitely tell her everything from the beginning to the end. However, this time, Yu chose to remain silent. However, Alice could tell that Yu was exhausted from this dream. Something must have happened. Alice nudged Gongjie's shoulder. "Why don't you ask him?" "How? What should I ask?" "Just ask him why he's so depressed. If he doesn't cooperate, we don't know how to proceed with the treatment plan." Gongjie said disdainfully, "You're his doctor, I'm not. But you're his uncle." Gongjie was speechless. Alice continued to beat around the bush. You promised sure that you would take good care of him. Why? Since you're an uncle, is there a problem with showing concern for your nephew? Gong Jia. He had no choice but to drink the wine in the cup in one gulp. Then he stood up, gave her a cold sidelong glance and left. At night the sea breeze was strong. The lights floating on the sea were like stars in the sky, rising and falling with the waves. One wave came, followed by another, and the air was filled with water droplets. Yu Yu hugged her knees and sat by the beach. Her gaze was far away, but it was unfocused and unfocused. He seemed to be lost in thought, so much so that he didn't notice Gong Jia sitting beside him. Gong Jia passed him a bottle of beer. Do you want a drink? Yu Yu realized that he was walking over, but her expression didn't change. She asked calmly, Does mommy know that you're making her nephew drink? When Gong Jia heard this, he retracted his hand resentfully. You're using your mommy to pressure me again. Does you like it? It's a tried and tested tactic. Gong Jia burst into laughter and ruffled his hair. Brat, tell me what happened. Gong Jia glanced at him. You've been sitting here for so long. What are you thinking about? Huh? I'm not thinking of anything. Chapter 4370. Gong Jia noticed that he was in low spirits, but he did not think much of it. If there's nothing wrong, why do you look so glum? Yu Yu muttered. How am I glum? You look so glum. And you're asking me why you're glum? Yu Yu stopped talking. Gong Jia placed his hands behind his back and closed his eyes, feeling the slightly damp sea breeze. Yu Yu did not want to answer, so he was not in a hurry to ask. In the dead silence, Yu Yu said bitterly, I killed me. Gong Jia was taken aback when he heard this. Clearly, he did not understand what the other meant. What do you mean? Gong Jia did not know whether to laugh or cry. Killed you? Why would I kill you? Besides, aren't you fine? I don't understand what you're saying. Yu Yu was obviously exhausted. He buried his face in his arms. Unknowingly, tears fell silently. Gong Jia did not notice that he was crying. Yu Yu buried his face in the crook of his arm as he cried silently. Gong Jia saw that he did not want to say anything else, so he kept quiet and accompanied him quietly. You're indeed my nephew. When I was young, I liked to sit by the sea when I was in a bad mood. I would feel the sea breeze and I would think things through. Yu Yu looked up but did not say anything. The night was getting late. Yu Yu stood up and turned around. He saw Gong Jia lying on the sofa, asleep. Was this really his uncle? Alice must have asked him to come over and comfort him. In the end, not only did he not comfort him, he even leisurely lay on the sofa and fell asleep. Yu Yu's eyelids drooped and he stepped on Gong Jia's stomach. Ugh! Gong Jia sat up in shock and groaned in pain. What are you doing? What are you doing here? Faced with Yu Yu's question, Gong Jia looked dazed. After a while, he answered honestly, Alice asked me to come over and check on you. And then? You fell asleep on the sofa. In the face of Yu Yu's cold humph, Gong Jia said disapprovingly, Why don't you give me a chance to care about you? You're just squatting here, motionless and silent. How am I supposed to comfort you? Yu Yu was stunned for a long time. When she saw the aggrieved expression on Gong Jia's face, she suddenly felt that her uncle was extremely cute. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha 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 ha. Yu Yu suddenly burst out laughing. Gong Jia was even more stunned and dumbfounded. Are you stupid? Ah ha 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 ha. What are you laughing at? Gong Jia stood up angrily and grabbed his collar. Are you laughing at me? Ha ha ha. Uncle, you're really too cute. Yu Yu laughed so hard that tears came out of her eyes. Gong Jia looked at him and suddenly stopped being angry. After a moment of silence, he said sympathetically, If you're upset, you can just cry it out. Yu Yu laughed and slowly stopped. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How am I upset? I'm not upset. I just feel that your aggrieved expression is really funny. If you want to cry, just cry. Why are you crying because you're laughing? Chapter 4371. Although I don't know what happened to you, you always say things that I don't understand. Gong Jia paused for a moment and squatted down again. He held his little face gently and rubbed it. But I will be like mommy and stay by your side forever. No matter what happens to you, you will always be my nephew, okay? Yu Yu clenched his teeth tightly. After hearing Gong Jie's words, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He clenched his teeth and tried to hold back his tears. Gong Jie knew that he had wanted to cry for a long time. Now that Yu Yu was crying, it meant that he had let go of his worries in front of him. Gong Jie's heart ached as he hugged him and said helplessly, "If you want to cry, just cry. Why are you still holding it in? If you keep crying in your heart, you will fall sick." As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Yu finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He cried loudly and wantonly. "Boo-hoo! Has he confessed?" Alice looked at Gong Jie as he walked into the laboratory and asked. Gong Jie had just sent Yu Yu back to his room. Yu Yu said that he was tired and wanted to lie down on the bed for a while. He thought that since he had cried for so long, his eyes must be sore from crying. Gong Jie closed the door and left. After hearing what he said, "I feel that it's a little unbelievable." "Oh," Alice was a little curious. "Tell me about it." Gong Jie told Alice everything that had happened in Yu Yu's dream. Alice listened and was silent for a long time. She also felt that it was a little unbelievable. "I finally understand what Yu Yu meant when he said that he had killed himself." Huh. Actually, Yu Yu has a sense of guilt in his heart. Among all the personalities, the mysterious young man was probably the violent personality that was nurtured in his body. He didn't notice it before. And the girl named Liang Yishan was the weakest personality in his body. The violent personality killed the weak personality. Although this meant that Yu Yu's feelings for the girl were too much. He must have felt that he was the one who forced the girl to die. Personally witnessing the death of one's personality is a very shocking thing, Alice said calmly. However, the fight between the personalities is not an accident. There had been such examples before. A person with multiple personalities was hypnotized into that world. The personalities fought each other, and all the good personalities decided to work together to kill the evil personality. When Gong Jie heard that, he immediately asked, "What happened in the end?" "In the end, I realized that the evil personality was the real master personality." Alice smiled and said, "In the end, the criminal was sentenced to life imprisonment." "Then what do you think of Yu Yu's current situation? Is it optimistic or not?" Alice shook her head with a serious expression. "From what I see, it's not very optimistic." Gong Jie suddenly became nervous. "Huh, what do you mean?" "First of all, he has been constantly traveling back and forth between that world and the real world. He has used up a lot of his mental strength. Moreover, in that world, he has been constantly experiencing things that he can't bear. This has put a lot of stress on his mental strength. So, for now, I think it's better to slow down and treat him conservatively to avoid a mental breakdown." Then, Gong Jie asked again, "What did Romanka say?" Chapter 4372. Gong Jie fell silent when he heard that. Alice said, "There's an old saying in country Z. When the car reaches the mountain, there will be a way out. Don't be too anxious. Take one step at a time. No matter how meticulous the plan is, it's impossible to plan everything." "I understand." Gong Jie stood up. "Rest early." In the room, Yu Yu was lying on the bed. His eyes were unfocused. He seemed to have adjusted his mental state. He closed his eyes and wanted to enter the dreamscape. Just as he was about to fall asleep, someone knocked on the door. He suddenly felt anxious. "Who is it?" Lisa's careful voice came from outside the door. "It's me, Yu Yu. Are you asleep? Get lost. Don't disturb me." Yu Yu lost his temper unexpectedly. Originally, he was about to fall asleep, but he was strangely not sleepy tonight. He had almost forced himself to fall asleep. Being disturbed at a critical moment, he became irritable. Lisa didn't expect Yu Yu to shout at her. One had to know that Yu Yu was known for his gentle temper, unlike Gong Fan, who was always cold and aloof. Such a gentle person actually threw a tantrum at her. Although she felt wronged, she didn't say anything and left quietly. After Lisa left, Yu Yu closed his eyes again, but he couldn't fall asleep. Hence he stood up, walked outside and rummaged through the cabinets. It wasn't easy to find a sedative in the medicine box. This was placed here by Alice. Moreover, the side effects were minimal. If he really couldn't fall asleep, he could take this medicine. Yu Yu swallowed the pill and returned to bed. About half an hour later, the effects of the medicine finally took effect. His eyelids drooped heavily. He entered the dream again. When Yu Yu woke up, he was in a boundless forest. He opened his eyes in a daze and saw Gong Fan's figure leaning against a tree. He didn't have time to bandage his wound and it was still bleeding. Yu Yu came back to his senses and climbed over nervously. He asked worriedly, "Does the wound still hurt?" Gong Fan said nonchalantly, "As long as you're not dead." Yu Yu was speechless. Even if you're injured in this world, your body is still fine in reality, isn't it? That seemed to be the case. When Yu Yu heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. "Does it hurt? Do you feel any pain?" Gong Fan was stunned and nodded. "Yes. Is it exactly the same as if you're injured in reality?" "Yes, the wound is very real. The pain is also very real," Gong Fan said with a smile. Yu Yu looked around. "Where are we now?" "I don't know, but we're already far away from the manor." Pursing his lips, he made up his mind. "I've decided. Yes. Let's pull ourselves together and find the other personalities. Then we'll kill them all. In this way, only the two of us will be left." When Gong Fan heard this, he couldn't help but gasp. He asked a question. "Just like that man we met in the hospital. Do you think we're his match?" Yu Yu was so embarrassed that he fell silent. That man was very powerful. More importantly, he had a strong murderous aura. Chapter 4373. "Let's not talk about that man for now," Gong Fan continued. "In this world, other than that man, there seem to be other personalities. Just now we spent a lot of effort to deal with that young man. In front of him, I feel that we don't have the ability to fight back at all. Alright, let's not talk about these two people for now. Then, if you meet a kind personality like Shanshan, would you be able to do it?" Yu Yu fell silent again. He couldn't be sure if he would be able to do it if he met a personality like Shanshan. Then what should we do? Yu Yu was suddenly at a loss. Gong Fan laughed and shook his head. He said helplessly, "I don't know either. We can only take one step at a time. Yu Yu, we don't know how many personalities there are in this world. There might be more. However, we can't beat that man alone." Yu Yu muttered to himself, "If only Xiaoyi-Chen was here." Haha, at this time you think Xiaoyi-Chen is good? Xiaoyi-Chen is very powerful. I'm sure that even such a strong man would only need a few moves to defeat him. It's a pity that Xiaoyi-Chen is your brother, not your personality. Yu Yu couldn't help but lower his head in disappointment. "Let's rest for a while first. We'll make plans when the sun rises." Gong Fan lay down beside him. Through the mottled shadows of the trees, they could see tiny twinkling stars in the blurry night sky. He raised his hand and pointed to the sky. He smiled at Yu Yu and said, "Look, that star is very small but very bright. Although it looks very small to the naked eye, it might be a very big planet." "Yes, but it's very far away from us. I didn't expect to see such a beautiful night sky in a dream like this." Yu Yu said emotionally, "To be honest, the scenery here is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be such a beautiful island in reality." When Gong Fan heard this, he suddenly said, "If that's the case, we can travel around the world in our dreams." The two little guys leaned against each other and began to chat. "In the future, I must invent a dream machine." "What is a dream creator?" "If possible, I hope that the dream creator machine is a pillow that can affect brainwaves. When people sleep on it, they can have countless beautiful dreams and see the scenery of the world." "That's a good idea, but with the current scientific methods, it doesn't seem to be possible." Yu Yu said, "That will have to wait until I grow up. Who knows, maybe when I grow up I will really invent the dream maker." Gong Fan smiled and patted his head. "Why did you spend your smart brain on such things? What's wrong? It wasn't some kind of crooked practice. Isn't it enough to invent some beautiful things? Nowadays, many people don't like to have nightmares. If there's a pillow like that, no one will have nightmares. That kind of pillow must be very expensive." Yu Yu reacted abruptly. "Why are we talking about such a meaningless topic? Who knows? You were the one who started it." Yu Yu sat up and looked around. He suggested, "Why don't we walk around? Maybe we'll find something new?" Gong Fan nodded. "That's good too." Chapter 4374. The two little guys stood up. They had not walked far when suddenly, there was a slight movement behind them. Yu Yu suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around warily. He felt that something was following behind him. Gong Fan saw him turn around again and couldn't help but become vigilant. What's the matter? I feel that there's a strange sound. How is that possible? Gong Fan turned around and sized him up. Why didn't I hear it? Could it be your imagination? Didn't you hear it? Yes. Yu exhaled. Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe it's the movement under our feet. I heard wrongly. He continued to walk forward. They were in a forest and there was a patch of grass under their feet. No matter how careful they were, it was inevitable that there would be a slight movement. Yu had only taken a few steps when he heard the strange movement behind him again. He stopped in his tracks. This time even Gong Fan heard it. His suspicions were aroused when he heard the boy's words earlier, so he paid attention to the movements behind him. As they walked forward, sure enough, someone was following them from behind. Someone. Yu lowered his voice and said to Gong Fan. Gong Fan nodded. I heard it. They were not loud and had some reservations. However, the footsteps behind them seemed to be following them and made them wary. What should we do? Yu looked at Gong Fan worriedly. I'll count to 1, 2, 3 later and quickly run in the south direction. Can you still run? It's okay, I'm fine. Okay, got it. Gong Fan and Yu tacitly reached out their hands. Their hands were tightly clasped together. They pretended to be calm and walked forward. 1, 2, 3. The moment Gong Fan reported the number 3, the two little fellows immediately broke into a run. Their movements were fast. The mysterious figure behind them clearly did not expect them to suddenly run. After a brief moment of being stunned, he quickly caught up with them. Gong Fan and Yu didn't run very fast, but their advantage was that they weren't very tall. They ran through the dense forest without any obstacles. In the forest, the branches were low. Gong Fan and Yu were like agile leopards as they shuttled through the dense forest. Gradually, they ran out of the forest and were surprised to find that the familiar manner was reflected in their eyes again. We're back. Gasping for breath, Yu let out a defeated groan. Gong Fan did not even have time to catch his breath. He pulled Yu and ran into the manor. Should we split up? Distract him? Yu made a suggestion. Gong Fan shook his head. No, I'm worried about you. All right, let's move together. The two little guys ran up the stairs one after the other. When they reached the highest floor, they lay on the escalator. The escalator in the manor was circular. Lying on the escalator, they could clearly see the figure walking up from below. Soon, that person rushed into the manor and followed the footprints to the escalator. Gong Fan's heart skipped a beat. He lifted his feet to take a look. Indeed, there were some mud spots on his feet. When they ran through the forest just now, the soles of their feet were the mud in the forest. Chapter 4375. Gong Fan followed his gaze and looked down. He saw that at the bottom of the building, a man was looking upstairs and quickly discovered them. Their gazes met. This man who had followed them all the way here was actually the mysterious man who had fought with them in the hospital. It's him. How could it be him? Could this man have followed them all the way from the hospital? Just as Gong Fan and Yu were still in shock, the man had already caught up with them quickly along the stairs. Gong Fan and Yu exchanged glances. They did not have the time to be emotional. They turned around and groped their way into the rooms one by one. Most of the rooms were locked from the back. Gong Fan and Yu pushed open the doors one by one. However, they suddenly heard another set of footsteps coming from the end of the corridor. Yu looked towards the end of the corridor and saw a blurry figure standing there. It was an ugly girl. She stood at the end of the corridor and saw Gong Fan and Yu. Immediately after, her face, which seemed to have been slashed by a knife, revealed an extremely sinister smile. They are there. Gong Fan and Yu were stunned. This girl seemed to know them, but they had never seen this girl before. At this moment, a young man walked over from beside the girl. And this young man was the one who had killed Shanshan's personality previously. The girl pointed at Gong Fan and Yu and ordered arrogantly, "Kill them." The young man's gaze was sinister as he quickly closed in on them. The girl was still dancing with joy. "Kill them, then we can merge into one and truly occupy this body. Kill them, kill them." What should we do? There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Regardless of whether it was going forward or backward, They had been completely blocked. Yu only felt his scalp go numb. Yu here. Gong Fan kicked open the door of a room and pulled Yu into the room. All the rooms in the manor were locked from the inside. Gong Fan locked the door from the inside and kept looking around. He walked to the window and pushed it open. He saw a row of narrow windows outside the window. Usually it was used to put some potted plants as decoration. It might be dangerous for adults, but they could walk on it and force their way through. Yu, maybe we can go through this window to another room and avoid them. But are you afraid? Yu looked out of the window with lingering fear. They were on a very high floor. If they accidentally fell down, they did not know what would happen. At this moment, the door was kicked open with an earth-shattering sound. Yu did not have time to consider so much. Let's give it a try. Okay. Gong Fan, be careful. Okay, I'll go. Gong Fan was the first to climb out of the window. Yu followed closely behind and climbed out as well. The two of them were just able to stand firmly on the narrow windowsill and carefully made their way to another window. Do you see it? There's a small flower bed on the floor below. We can jump onto that flower bed first. Gong Fan pointed at him. Yu saw it too. He took a deep breath and jumped down. When Gong Fan saw it, he followed closely behind and jumped down. The two of them had just jumped down from the flower bed when they heard a girl's sharp scream from above. There. Chapter 4376. Gong Fan and Yu looked up and saw that the girl and the young man had already broken through the door and thrown themselves in front of the window. Here, go in from here. The two of them jumped in through an open window. Yu grabbed Gong Fan's hand and ran toward the door. The moment the door was opened, Gong Fan woke up abruptly. He had woken up from his dream. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he was lying on the bed. The first thing he saw was Alice's flustered face. Yu? Or Gong Fan? I'm awake. Gong Fan sat up immediately and realized that there was not only Alice, Huajin, Gongjia, Luomenka, and Xiaoichen in the room. And beside the bed, Yun Shirshir was leaning against Muyaja, sizing him up in fear. I'm Gong Fan. Gong Fan was still immersed in the nightmare just now and his heart was still palpitating. In the dream, the few of them were still fighting. Why did he wake up at this critical moment? Gong Fan was suddenly at a loss. Yun Shirshir opened her mouth and wanted to go up and hug him, but because of Alice's previous warning, she held Muyaja's hand and did not move. After her wound healed, she did not care about recuperating and rushed over without stopping. She was worried that if she was a little later, she would not be able to see Gong Fan for the last time. Now that she saw that Gong Fan was fine and safe, she did not dare to breathe a sigh of relief. She was worried that she would really lose Gong Fan before she could comfort him for long. This was really a complicated feeling. Yun Shirshir sat down by the bed. Gong Fan, are you okay? Mommy. Gong Fan's eyes turned red when he saw Yun Shirshir. He never thought that he would be able to see Yun Shirshir and Muyaja again. He was filled with emotions. He sniffled and said sadly, "Last time it really wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything to hurt you. Even if others don't believe me, you have to believe me." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she felt as if a knife had been twisted in her heart. She held his hand tightly and emphasized, "If Mommy didn't believe you, why would I come to see you? Why would I accompany you? How could Mommy believe that Gong Fan, whom she dotes on the most, would bear to do something to hurt me?" When Gong Fan heard this, he was relieved. With reddened eyes, he snuggled into Yun Shirshir's arms. Even though Yun Shirshir's wound had not completely recovered, she did not push Gong Fan away. She hugged him tightly, even if it affected her wound. Alice watched from the side. After hesitating for a while, she had to interrupt them. "I really don't want to disturb your warm moment, but I still have to say something. Gong Fan, since you're awake, why don't you tell us what happened in the dream?" Gong Fan then reacted and said nervously, "What should we do? Yu is in danger now." "Danger? Do you still remember the dangerous young man I told you about before?" Alice and Romanka looked at each other and nodded. "He's not dead yet." "Not dead." And there was another girl who appeared with him. They seemed to have a clear goal, which was to kill Yu and me. Then they could replace us and take over our bodies. I guess Yu and I both suspect that he was the one who stabbed Mommy. Chapter 4377. Alice analyzed. In other words, he has appeared before, but was it only that one time? Probably. This personality is a rather violent one. Gong Fan frowned. Actually, he should have appeared more than once. Then what about the other man? Luo Manka mentioned the most important point. No matter how powerful that young man is, he might not be a match for that man. Gong Fan shook his head. Who exactly is that man? What is his motive? Why has he been following me and Yu? We don't even know the reason. It's very mysterious. Has he hurt you? No, he doesn't have the chance. Mu Yaja gently tugged at Yun Shirshir and said to her, "Now let's leave this room first. Alice and this professor should take good care of Gong Fan. We won't be of much help to the child here." Okay. Yun Shirshir nodded hesitantly and left the room quietly with Mu Yaja. When Gong Jia saw this, he also followed them out. Hua Jin also felt that it was not convenient to stay here, so he told Lisa to stay and also left quickly. Outside the room there was a row of stools. Yun Shirshir sat down on the stool with a pale face. Although her wound had barely healed, the deeper wounds were still in the process of healing. Because she had rushed over from afar, it was inevitable that her wound would be affected. After getting off the plane, Yun Shirshir insisted on coming over to see Yu despite the jet lag. Mu Yaja couldn't stop her, so he let her go. Now you've seen that Yu and Gong Fan are fine. You should rest well. Mu Yaja comforted her. Yun Shirshir shook her head. I can't sleep well. If you don't listen, then I won't let you stay. Yun Shirshir raised her head and looked at Mu Yaja with tears in her eyes. However, she saw that the man had a firm attitude and was obviously unwilling to give in. You said you wanted to see Yu, so I brought you here. Now that Yu and Gong Fan are safe and sound, if you don't take care of yourself, I will get angry. After their marriage, Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir treated each other with respect, and there was almost no argument between them. Mu Yaja had never been angry with her, and always let her do whatever she wanted. This was the first time she had seen anger on his face since they got married. Yun Shirshir immediately begged for mercy. I know I was wrong. Alright, I got it. I'll sit here for a while and then go back to rest. Seeing that Yun Shirshir was still worried, Gong Jia comforted her. Sister, I'm here. What are you afraid of? Yun Shirshir wanted to say something but stopped. Gong Jia probed. Are you afraid that you won't see Yu or Gong Fan again when you wake up? Yun Shirshir sucked in a deep breath of cold air. Despite her heartache, she nodded. Yes. Sister, don't be afraid. Gong Jia squatted down in front of her, gently grabbed her hand and kissed her fingertips. There are so many of us guarding Yu. What are you afraid of? Are you still worried about me? If anything happens, I won't hide it from you. I'll tell you immediately. Now you can go to sleep in peace, right? Yun Shirshir nodded reluctantly. Chapter 4378. Got it. Go and rest in peace. Gong Jia rubbed her head dotingly. Even though Yun Shirshir was her sister, this scene would make people who didn't know better think that Gong Jia was the older brother. Yun Shirshir smiled. After Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir left, Gong Jia stood guard outside the door. In the room, Alice didn't mince her words. Gong Fan, from what you said, it seems that the situation isn't optimistic. Then let's adjust the treatment plan. Alice and Romanka sat down by the bed one after another and said with a serious expression, Now we request that if you return to that world, you must kill that young man and that girl by hook or by crook. Also, find the other personalities. If they are bad personalities, kill them directly. Don't leave them alive. Okay. Romanka asked. Do you still remember that manor? Gong Fan was stunned. Yes. That manor is the place where the other personalities live. After all the personalities are gone, you must burn that manor down. Then what about that hospital? Professor Romanka and I agree that that hospital is Yu's original spiritual world. You don't have to care about it. In other words, the hospital represents the main personality, and the manor is the place where the other personalities are born. If we don't care about the manor, then there will be an endless stream of personalities coming out of the manor. Gong Fan frowned and suddenly realized the seriousness of the matter. He shuddered. But I've been in that manor since I was conscious. That place is like my home. Why didn't I notice anyone else at that time? Alice said, trying to dispel his doubts. At that time, you didn't establish a connection with the other personalities. They didn't know of your existence and you didn't know of their existence. The reason why you can see them now is because Professor Romanka created a dream through hypnosis. All the personalities gathered together and could see each other. Otherwise, you wouldn't even see you. In other words, before this, I didn't have a connection with the other personalities. So, we didn't know of each other's existence. I see. But why was I the only one discovered by you? They misjudged that Yu has dual personality disorder. But it's actually multiple personality disorder. Isn't it? Alice said. You're wrong. These personalities are still immature. From now on, that manor is no longer your home. Your home is this body. You will become one with Yu. Everything else is not important. Do you understand? Gong Fan nodded his head seriously. Now, do you have any questions? I'm afraid, even if Yu and I work together, we won't be a match for that young man and that man. Gong Fan still had a lingering fear. They are too powerful. I see. At this moment, Alice was also at a loss as to what to do. She looked at Romanka blankly. Romanka said, I don't know what to do about this either. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. Romanka shrugged. Although it can't be said to be solved by force, perhaps it can be solved by wisdom. Wisdom? In short, you have to think of a way. None of us can do anything about this. We are not in that world, so we can't give an intuitive opinion. Chapter 4379. Gong Fan got out of bed and did a checkup. He ate some food to replenish his energy. Then, Luomanka brought him to the fitness center to train his body. Because he had been lying in bed repeatedly during this period, Gong Fan's physical fitness had declined rapidly. After training for an hour, Gong Fan rested for a while. After dinner, he lay on the bed. He entered the dream world smoothly. Gong Fan woke up in that world. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he was in a room. Footsteps came and went outside the door. Yu was beside him, leaning against him tightly. Seeing that he was awake, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. What's going on? Gong Fan saw that the door and windows were locked. The moment he spoke, Yu shushed him warily. Don't make a sound. They're looking for us outside the door. Yu pointed outside the door. Gong Fan immediately nodded. He lowered his voice and told Yu about Alice and Luomanka's instructions. Yu widened his eyes in shock. Are you crazy? How can the two of us be a match for those two guys? Let's not talk about that man for now. We can't even defeat that young man. Gong Fan's face was dejected. There's no other way. This is our biggest predicament now. Yu leaned his head against the wall. Let me rest for a while. When Gong Fan fainted, Yu helped him down to the first floor. He was so tired that he was half dead. Fortunately, the young man and the girl had not discovered them yet. If they broke through the door, they would escape through the window. Anyway, they were on the way, so they would not be injured if they jumped through the window. If they jumped in through the window, they would turn around, open the door and run out. However, after enduring the fear for so long, Yu was a little tired. He rubbed his temples and felt that the two of them were really cowardly. If it were Xiaoi Chen, he would have gone out and killed them. At this moment, Yu began to envy Xiaoi Chen's muscular limbs. Gong Fan said dejectedly, Don't mention Xiaoi Chen anymore. It's not a good idea to keep hiding here. Yu suddenly stood up and carefully searched the room. Seeing this, Gong Fan asked curiously, What are you looking for? Let me see if there's anything convenient that I can use as a weapon. I can't fight him with my bare hands, right? Gong Fan immediately walked over and picked up the candlestick on the table. I think this is not bad. The bottom of the candlestick is very hard and the tip can pierce people. It can attack and defend and is easier to hold. It's just a candlestick. If I use it, what will you use? Gong Fan looked around and saw a vase on the windowsill. He braced himself and picked it up. He pouted and said, This vase will do. It can also be used for defense. Why am I so worried about you? Yu sized up the vase. Feels so fragile. It will break if I touch it. It's better than being bare-handed. I feel like I don't have any confidence if I don't have anything on me. Is there a gun in the manor? I don't know. I don't think so. Gong Fan was silent for a while and suddenly thought of something. I remember that there was a shotgun hanging on the wall in the reception room of my room. Shotgun? What shotgun? Chapter 4380. Is this place far from your room? I'm a little lost. I have to go to the corridor to recall the layout. Yu took a deep breath. Okay. After confirming that there were no more footsteps outside, he mustered up his courage and opened the door. There was really no one outside. He probably couldn't find him here and didn't want to go upstairs. Yu was a little afraid of this young man. It wasn't because he was timid. It was because the young man's murderous aura was too terrifying. I know where this is. Gong Fan recalled. My room. You have to walk along this corridor and turn left. The first room at the end is mine. Yu looked around. The empty corridor inevitably gave him a creepy feeling. This place gives me a bad feeling. As Yu spoke, he said to Gong Fan, let's go to your room. What if our footsteps attract attention? Yu raised his eyebrows. We can crawl over. Gong Fan said. Can you be more serious? I'm already very serious. Yu smiled and grabbed his shoulder. Actually, as long as you're here, I'm not so afraid. Anyway, I have you. I'm not alone. Gong Fan's heart couldn't help but be touched, but he didn't show it. Instead, he turned his face away awkwardly, but his eyes narrowed into a smile. The two little fellows tiptoed towards the room where Gong Fan was. They were constantly paying attention to the noises around them. As they were vigilant, they tried their best to tread lightly. Soon they arrived at Gong Fan's room. As soon as they entered the room, Yu saw the shotgun hanging on the wall. His eyes lit up. There's really a shotgun. Gong Fan was also relieved, but he was still a little worried. I don't know if this gun can be used. I always thought it was just a decoration. Let's try it. At least it's a deterrent, isn't it? Yu immediately went forward, stepped on the stool, and took the shotgun from the wall. He fiddled with it but couldn't figure out what was going on. He wasn't good with guns, especially shotguns. He didn't even know how to load or change the bullets. Gong Fan said, this is a shotgun. It doesn't have a long shooting range, but it's very powerful at close range. The bullets of this kind of gun scatter widely, and it shoots out several bullets at once. As long as one or two hit the target, it will be enough to make him suffer. I heard that being shot by a shotgun at close range is explosive damage. Yes, Gong Jie said. I've heard from Gong Jie that if the shotgun hits the head at close range, the scene would be spectacular. Oh, so heavy. Gong Fan immediately walked over and took the shotgun from Yu's hands. He looked at it carefully. There were bullets in the gun, but not many. After checking, he found that the bullets were the more common 12GA bullets. The gun was indeed quite heavy. Even Gong Fan found it difficult to carry it. Just as the two little guys were engrossed in studying the shotgun, Gong Fan was the first to feel a murderous aura coming from behind. He turned around abruptly, only to see a figure appear at the door. The youth stood at the door. When he saw the two of them, his eyes lit up. So you're here. Chapter 4381. The youth smiled evilly with a carefree expression. I've been looking for you for a long time. Yu heard the commotion and turned around. When he saw that it was him, he instinctively stretched out his arm and shielded Gong Fan behind him. He warned, don't come over. Gong Fan hugged the gun tightly and hurriedly loaded it. He raised the gun and aimed it at him. When the black muzzle was pointed at the youth, the latter was stunned. He was indeed intimidated. He stood where he was and did not move forward. He just looked indifferent. I was wondering why you stopped running when you saw me. Turns out that you have guns in your hands. However, do you know how to use a gun? He narrowed his eyes and his tone was extremely disdainful. Do you dare to kill? Yu could not help but shudder. Gong Fan gulped and immediately calmed down. Yes, we haven't killed anyone. However, if you dare to take a step forward, we won't care so much. Yu questioned. Who exactly are you? What's your name? Name? The youth tilted his head and laughed coldly. Who do you think we are? We're just orphans. Names? We don't have names. Only you have names. When Yu heard this, he did not think much of it. What do you mean? What do you mean by orphans? We were exiled. No one cares about us at all. Haha, isn't that so? Gong Fan's hand, which was holding the gun, suddenly trembled. Yu took a deep breath and felt his scalp go numb. Now they should not hesitate to shoot the young man. However, in the face of a living person, perhaps it was not appropriate to call him a person. In the face of a living personality, Gong Fan really did not have the courage to pull the trigger. He felt that it was too cruel to do so. He had never hunted anyone before. It was too cruel to force him and his other personalities to kill each other. Just as he was hesitating, the youth reacted quickly and pounced on Gong Fan like a cheetah. His target was very clear. In fact, Yu was the closest to him. However, he did not pounce on Yu because Gong Fan had a gun in his hand. Naturally, he would deal with the number one threat first before dealing with the rest. Yu exclaimed. She wanted to stop him, but it was too late. The young man pushed Gong Fan to the ground and snatched the gun from his hand. His strength was not something an ordinary person could resist. Gong Fan was completely powerless in front of him. The shotgun fell to the side. When Yu saw it, he rushed forward recklessly and hugged the gun as he rolled around. He no longer cared about the last bit of kindness in his heart and shot the young man in the back. Bang! For Yu, even if it was a shotgun, the recoil was too much for him to handle. The head of the gun tilted, and the bullet hit the wall, forming a hole, and a layer of dust fell off. Oh no! He missed. Yu was so annoyed that he wanted to shoot again, but he didn't know how to load the gun. He was so anxious that he broke out in a cold sweat. The young man was startled. He turned around and stared at Yu with his bloodshot eyes. Without a doubt, this spear had thoroughly infuriated him. To him, Yu's shot was undoubtedly a great provocation. He was provoking him. The youth was about to get up when Gong Fan grabbed his sleeve tightly. Don't hurt him. Chapter 4382. The young man laughed when he heard that. I couldn't tell that you guys are such close brothers. Get lost. He kicked Gong Fan away and walked toward Yu. He was sure that Yu wouldn't know how to load the gun or use it. In addition, he rushed over so quickly that Yu couldn't even react in time. He made a decision subconsciously. No matter what, the gun couldn't land on him. Hence he threw the gun far away. In the next second, the young man pounced on him like a wolf. Yu was pinned to the ground and a punch landed on his face. Ugh! Yu groaned in pain and stared at him in disbelief. You? Bam! The young man punched again without holding back. This punch made Yu feel a real shock in his head. It was so painful that his eyes were filled with pain. Why? Let me ask you why. The young man was almost roaring. Why do you deserve to be loved and doted on, while I have to stay here and suffer in silence and loneliness? Why am I the one who was abandoned while you are cared for by so many people? I hate you. Gong Fan sat up. Just as he was about to stand up, he felt a strong sense of dizziness. His head was already injured. When the young man threw him to the ground, his wound was hit again and he was about to lose his balance. While he was in a daze, he vaguely saw the unfamiliar girl quietly walk to the door and see the chaotic scene in the room. She caught a glimpse of the gun from the corner of her eyes and was stunned for a second before walking towards the gun. No. Gong Fan immediately became alert. He couldn't let such a dangerous weapon fall into the girl's hands. He held his head and staggered toward the girl. The girl saw him walking toward her and screamed. Then she quickly picked up the gun from the ground. However, the gun was not loaded at the moment. It seemed that she didn't know much about guns. Hence, she fumbled around anxiously for a long time but still couldn't figure out how to load the gun. The girl was so anxious that she broke out in cold sweat. Gong Fan stopped him. Calm down. We're all the same. Why do we have to kill each other? The girl's scarred face was filled with anger. We are not the same. We are all orphans. Only by killing you can we become the owners of this body. Otherwise, we will only be at the mercy of others. Thinking of this, the girl no longer hesitated. The teenager strangled Yu's neck and suddenly said, Hold the gun handle and push the handguard forward. That's loading. Don't you remember? I taught you. The girl came to a sudden realization. She pulled the shotgun and successfully loaded it. Kill him. The young man's voice sounded like a curse. The girl pointed the gun at Gong Fan. The black muzzle of the gun was emitting a cold aura. Her finger was on the trigger. With a slight pull, the bullet would rush out of the muzzle and mercilessly pierce through his body. Gong Fan was still some distance away from her. Just as the gun was pointed at him, he suddenly retreated. Bang! Gong Fan fell backward to the ground. With a burst of sparks, the bullet hit the leather sofa behind him, creating a hole. Chapter 4383. The girl's attention was immediately diverted by this voice. In his confusion, Yu felt that the youth's strength had loosened a little because he was distracted. From the corner of his eye, he saw the man who had been following them all the way rushing in. He felt a sense of despair. Presumably this young man and this girl were the same. They all wanted nothing more than to kill him and Gong Fan. However, just as he thought this, he saw the man rush toward the girl and snatch the gun from her hand at lightning speed. He held both ends of the gun with both hands and used his knee to break the gun into two. The man threw the gun aside, grabbed the girl's collar, and threw her out of the door. Seeing this, the youth's heart ached. He roared and pounced on the man. Yu's brain was in a state of hypoxia. The youth suddenly let go and oxygen rushed into his body, causing a moment of dizziness. He fell to the ground weakly and no longer had the ability to control his body. However, Gong Fan still retained a trace of consciousness. He looked at the man in a daze. He did not deal with them immediately. Instead, he fought with the youth. They fought barehanded and the sound of flesh could be heard. Just by listening to the exaggerated sounds of the punches, one could imagine how painful it would be if those fists landed on one's body. The man and the youth were equally numb. It was obvious that they had no reaction to the pain. However, there was a huge difference in physique after all. The youth was even faster and was at a disadvantage. The man knocked him to the ground with a punch. Moreover, his methods were so sharp that the joints of the youth's arms were dislocated. The youth's bones were broken and he cried out in pain. He hugged his arms that were hanging weakly by his side and the veins on his forehead were exposed. "Why are you helping them?" he asked hysterically. Gong Fan was a little stunned. This man wasn't their enemy, but had been silently helping them all this time? Thinking about it carefully, it was indeed not bad. Even though this man was strong, even though this man had been following them from the beginning until now, he had even followed them from corners that they did not notice. However, from the beginning until now, he had not done anything to hurt them. It could be seen that this man's strength was far above the youth's, but he had not hurt them at all. What was going on? "Kill them." The young man panted heavily and said to the man, "Otherwise we, including you, will never see the light of day again." This was unfair, wasn't it? We didn't even get a good look at that world. Why did he have to live in such a dark corner? We have the right to exist too, don't we? The man listened, his eyes empty for a second. The young man thought that the man was moved and tried again. "Wake up. Even if you help them, they might not be grateful to you. What do you gain from doing this?" The man was stunned. While he was distracted, the young man used the last of his strength to pull out a sharp dagger from his waist belt with his dislocated hand and stabbed it into the man's thigh. Hiss! The man let out a muffled groan and his legs twitched involuntarily. Even though the young man's hand was dislocated and he didn't have much strength, the wound wasn't deep, but it was still painful enough. Chapter 4384. The man got up from the ground. Enduring the pain, he grabbed the dagger in his leg and pulled it out. In an instant, blood gushed out. Gong Fan was dumbfounded. This man seemed to be saving them. Could this be the sanctioner that Alice was talking about? Or could it be the kind and righteous personality in Yu's body? The youth's hands were dislocated. He kept trying to put his arms back together, but he had no strength left. Both of them were covered in cold sweat. The youth also gave up resisting. He fell to the ground and leaned against the wall, his eyes empty. "Why?" He tilted his head and looked at the man. He was crying and laughing as he muttered, "Why do you want to destroy all my dreams? I just want to live well. Live well. Could it be that this is also wrong?" The man took a deep breath but did not speak. Could it be that he did not know how to speak? Gong Fan was a little suspicious and asked carefully, "Who are you?" Hearing this, the man turned around and looked at him deeply. At that moment, a gentle smile gradually appeared on his cold face. This smile was enough to melt the hardest ice in the world. Gong Fan was stunned. Yu Yu also gradually woke up. The killing in front of him seemed to have come to an end. He opened his mouth and wanted to speak, but the man had already made his move. He walked in front of the girl and gripped her throat tightly with his large palm. The girl slowly woke up from her temporary coma and felt the man's murderous intent. Her hands struggled wildly and her legs kicked wildly. "Don't kill me. I beg you, don't kill me." A trace of helplessness finally appeared in the man's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said as if he could not hide the guilt in his heart. The strength in his hand kept increasing. Gradually, the girl let out struggling and suffocating sounds. Her eyes suddenly widened. After kicking her legs, they stiffened and stopped moving. When the youth saw this, he was so shocked that he stood rooted to the ground. Yu Yu and Gong Fan looked at each other. They also felt that it was too cruel and could not bear to watch. The man carried the girl up, walked to the window sill, and gently threw her downstairs. In an instant, the girl's body gradually shattered, turning into millions of tiny stars that gradually dissipated. "No!" The young man crawled up from the ground in a sorry state and rushed to the window. However, he could only watch as the girl's body turned into specks of stars and drifted into the distance with the wind outside the window. The muscles on his face stiffened, and countless howls of grief choked his throat. When he turned his head back, his eyes were scarlet red. "I will kill you." Even though he no longer had the ability to resist, the pain of losing his best friend made him desperate. He threw himself at the man without a care for his own safety, but the man calmly held onto the hilt of the knife. In an instant, the sharp tip of the knife pierced his chest. The young man didn't even have time to see the man's hand movements before he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He lowered his head in shock, only to see the dagger that had pierced through his chest. His eyelids twitched fiercely as he staggered back and fell to the ground. He could only watch as blood flowed out, but he was powerless to resist death. Chapter 4385. The man remained silent and only looked at him silently. The young man broke down and shouted, "I just want to live, I just want to live well. Why is it right for all of you to be unscrupulous in order to survive, but I can't do the same if I want to live? This is not fair. This is not fair." As the young man spoke, he suddenly choked and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Gong Fan stood up shakily and went to the young man, looking at him pitifully. The young man coughed and cried, "Why can't you let me live? Why can't you tolerate me? Why? Don't I have the right to exist in this world?" After shouting for a while, his eyes suddenly widened and he stopped moving. The man came in front of him, squatted down and sighed. He slowly placed his hand on the young man's eyes and gently smoothed them out. The young man closed his eyes and his body gradually turned transparent. Slowly he turned into a star and disappeared. Yu Yu didn't know why, but when he saw this scene he felt sad. The young man gradually disappeared. The dagger fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The man picked up the dagger. Gong Fan couldn't help but be alert. He stood in front of Yu Yu and looked at him warily. "You won't do anything to hurt us, right?" He couldn't be sure if the man would hurt them. If he really hurt them, even if it meant risking his life, he would do his best to protect Yu Yu. However, Yu Yu smiled and gently held Gong Fan's shoulder. He smiled weakly and said, "Gong Fan, he won't hurt us. Can't you see that he has been protecting us all this time?" Gong Fan was still in disbelief. He turned to look at the man, but he was puzzled. "Why are you protecting us?" The man didn't speak. Instead, he knelt in front of Yu Yu on one knee and stroked his cheek gently with his large palm. Yu Yu seemed to know what he was going to do and grabbed his wrist. "No." The man was slightly stunned. "Can't we live together?" He paused after every word, as if he was trying to persuade him to stay. When the man heard this, he came back to his senses and shook his head with a smile. "Why?" Yu Yu didn't understand. "We can survive together. I'm willing to accept you. Gong Fan is also willing to accept you. My family is also willing to accept you." When the man heard this, his eyes flickered. Gong Fan also understood the man's intention and stopped him. "Don't do anything stupid." The man suddenly broke free from Yu Yu's restraints and stabbed the sharp end of the dagger into his heart. He was so ruthless that the dagger sank into his chest. The man groaned in pain and fell to the ground. He leaned against the wall, but he closed his eyes peacefully, as if waiting for death to come. Yu Yu's heart trembled violently and tears flowed out of his eyes. He pushed Gong Fan away and crawled to the man's side. He held his shoulders and asked in a trembling voice, "Why? Why did you do this?" The man opened his eyes and looked at him seriously. He gently covered the back of his hand with his bloody hand. His thin lips parted slightly and he finally spoke in a hoarse voice. "You are the proof that I'm alive. You are the proof that I'm alive." Chapter 4386. After the man finished speaking, he calmly closed his eyes. His body, like the young man and the girl, gradually turned transparent. Gong Fan knew that this was a sign that he was about to disappear. It was as if the disappearance of all his personalities would turn into stars and eventually drift into the distance. He wanted to reach out and hold the man's hand, but he grabbed nothing. Yu Yu looked at all of this with a numb expression. Suddenly he understood everything. In ancient times, there was a Mencius who once said, "Man is born good." However, Sun Zi believed that man's life was in heaven. Without heaven and earth, evil is born. Heaven and earth. All things are born in harmony and nurtured in their own way. Once the heavenly duty is established and the heavenly merit is achieved, the form is formed and the spirit is born. Since man was born from heaven, human feelings were also born from heaven's feelings. Human feelings that were born from heaven's feelings were called nature. Therefore, Sun Zi said, "Nature is born for a reason. Nature is born naturally. Nature is born naturally. Nature is born naturally. Love is the nature of nature." In other words, Sun Zi believed that man was born evil. As he grew older and was educated with morals, he would abandon his initial evil and selfish side. And this girl and young man represented his initial evil intentions. And this man was the reaper formed in his subconscious. He disregarded all dangers and secretly protected him. Moreover, he fought with the young man to the death in order to wipe out the last remaining personality that represented evil in his body. What was left was a kind personality, and the reason why he chose to disappear was because his hands were also stained with blood. He did not want to stay and tarnish Yu Yu's soul. He chose to disappear with all the evil, leaving behind the purest land. Yu Yu watched helplessly as the man turned into specks of light and drifted out of the window with the wind blowing in from the window. He was right. Yu Yu thought that the fact that he was alive and well was proof of his existence. Everything had come to an end. Alice stayed by the bed, but when she saw Yu Yu lying on the bed, she suddenly choked with sobs. She moved closer to him. Just as she was puzzled, she saw another tear roll down from the corner of his eye. What happened? She couldn't help but worry. "Why are you crying?" Alice picked up the handkerchief and wanted to wipe away his tears. Just as she wiped them away, the tears fell down again. She was caught off guard. Alice's heart ached over and over again. She tirelessly wiped his tears and gently held his hand. She wanted to pass all her courage and strength to him through the palm of her hand. What happened? Romanka was not as attentive as her. Seeing that she was wiping away Yu Yu's tears, she also sat up straight. Alice shook her head blankly. "I don't know what happened. He seems to be crying." "Crying?" Romanka walked softly to the bedside and looked at Yu Yu worriedly. However, she saw that his expression was unprecedentedly calm. "I'm so worried. I'm so afraid that there will be an accident." If it was possible, Alice was willing to enter that world. She did not want Yu Yu and Gong Fan to face it alone. But she could not. She could only stay by the bed and watch helplessly. There was nothing she could do. "I believe that everything will be fine." Chapter 4387. The world gradually calmed down. Gong Fan leaned against the window and looked at the stars that gradually drifted into the distance. Then he could no longer see them, but his heart was unprecedentedly calm. Everything is over. Then, Gong Fan turned his head and was puzzled. What about us? What should we do? Help me. Yu Yu stretched out his hand. Gong Fan smiled and reached out his hand. The two of them held each other's hands tightly. He pulled him up. Yu Yu's legs went soft and he almost fell again. Gong Fan immediately supported him steadily. Be careful. Yu Yu finally steadied himself. He looked up and met his eyes. Gong Fan also looked at him calmly. Are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Gong Fan smiled and did not think much of it. What's there to be afraid of when I'm with you? Gong Fan, come with me. Yu Yu opened his arms and smiled gently. Become one with me. We'll never be separated again. Gong Fan suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Yu Yu. How does it feel to become one with you? Gong Fan laughed. Will I be able to see Mommy again? I don't know either. Yu Yu pursed his lips and said, Alice told me that the goal this time is to find you, get rid of all the negative personalities, and become one with you. This way we won't be separated for the rest of our lives. We'll be together forever. Really? Are you willing? Gong Fan nodded solemnly. I'm willing. He also opened his arms and hugged Yu Yu tightly. The two little guys hugged each other tightly. Yu Yu closed his eyes quietly and said softly, Gong Fan, let's go home together. I miss Mommy and I miss Daddy. Gong Fan sniffed and smiled. He hugged Yu Yu even tighter. Let's go home together. The two children hugged each other tightly. Gradually, their bodies became transparent. Yu Yu was surprised to find that Gong Fan's body was emitting spots of light. It was as if he was surrounded by the Milky Way. Could it be that he was going to disappear? Impossible. Gong Fan was not dead. It was impossible for him to disappear. Yu Yu hugged him even tighter. Gradually, Gong Fan's body became even more transparent. He slowly merged into Yu Yu's body. In a daze, Yu Yu saw Gong Fan's eyes filled with determination and conviction. Yu Yu, we promised that we would never separate. We agreed to go home together. These were the last words that Gong Fan said to Yu Yu. Yu Yu's bosom gradually became empty. Gong Fan turned into countless stars and revolved around him. For a moment the world was dark. Gradually, the manor disappeared, and so did the forest. Yu Yu opened his eyes and could only see the barren darkness around him. There was only a patch of stars surrounding him. He gently opened his palm. A few stars fell on his palm, giving him a great sense of warmth. What a warm feeling. The stars surrounded him and finally flowed into his body bit by bit. It was as if countless warm currents were flowing into his body. Chapter 4388. Yu Yu is awake. Early in the morning, Alice was like a happy bird as she passed on the good news. Yu Yu is awake. Yun Shirshir opened the door and saw Alice standing at the doorway with tears in her eyes. She was touched and comforted. She looked at Yun Shirshir and stuck out her tongue. Tears rolled down her cheeks because of joy. Shirshir, Yu Yu is awake. It was just a few words, but her tone was filled with uncontrollable excitement. Yun Shirshir could even hear the slight tremble in her voice. What do you mean by awake? Through the brain imaging, we found that his two personalities have merged together. All the memories of Gong Fan and Yu Yu have been preserved and merged together. In other words, the two personalities of Yu Yu and Gong Fan have merged together perfectly. As Alice spoke, she finally relaxed her brows. Yu Yu has returned to the way he was in the past. Shirshir, I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Because of the matter between Yu Yu and Gong Fan, she did not dare to face Yun Shirshir and felt very guilty. After all, she could not erase her responsibility for causing the child to become like this. However, now that Yu Yu and Gong Fan had merged together and returned to the past, this was an outcome that everyone was happy to see. The old Yu Yu has returned. Yun Shirshir, who had been in a daze for a long time, finally woke up because of this sentence. Where is he now? He is still in the hospital bed in the laboratory. As he has just finished the brain imaging, he is a little sleepy. I asked him to eat something before resting. Yun Shirshir could not hide her excitement. Can I go and see him now? Of course. As soon as she finished speaking, Alice saw Yun Shirshir running towards the dining room. Yu Yu. Yu Yu. His heart was filled with these two burning words. Yu Yu had finally returned to the past, while Gong Fan remained in his body forever. She had not lost a single one. Yun Shirshir was crying tears of joy as she ran. After being in fear for so long, she was even prepared to lose Gong Fan. She flew all the way here in fear. She was worried that this would be the last time she would see Gong Fan. Unexpectedly, Yu Yu and Gong Fan were safe and sound. At this moment, The excitement in her heart was indescribable. Yoon Shirshir ran without a care for her own safety. She ran through the long corridor and rushed into the laboratory. When she reached the door, her footsteps slowed down. Strangely, after running for so long and so fast, he didn't feel tired at all. Yoon Shirshir stood at the door and looked at Yu, who was lying on the bed, looking weak but calmly eating porridge. Her tears fell uncontrollably again. This was the joy of regaining what he had lost, as well as guilt, joy, and all sorts of other complex emotions. Her lips trembled. She resisted the urge to cry and walked to Yu's bedside. Yu's hand that was eating porridge paused. He looked up and saw that it was Yoon Shirshir. First he was shocked. Then he revealed that unfamiliar, long-lost, but incomparably familiar doting smile. "Good morning, Mommy." It was a simple greeting, but it was warm. Although Yu and Gong Fan had always been around, ever since the two personalities separated, Yu was no longer the original him. The Yu of the past had a warm smile that was full of doting. Chapter 4389. In this smile, Yoon Shirshir vaguely saw Yu and Gong Fan again. They had returned to the past. Yoon Shirshir covered her mouth and cried tears of joy. "Boo-hoo!" She let out a whimper. Seeing her like this, Yu held his forehead helplessly. "Mommy, why are you crying? Aren't I fine?" Even though he said that, his eyes had unknowingly turned completely red. His lips were trembling badly as if he was trying his best to hold something back. Yu tried his best to smile, but when the corners of his lips curled up, it looked like he was crying. Yoon Shirshir couldn't hold it in anymore. She pounced on the bed and hugged him tightly. "Yu, Mommy missed you so much. Mommy missed you so much." She thought that she would never see Gong Fan again. She didn't expect, at that moment, there were too many emotions in her heart. Yu hugged her too and gently stroked the back of her head. Even though he was still a teenager, his actions exuded a mature aura. "Okay, don't cry, okay? Mommy, I'm sorry to have made you worry." Yu gently patted her face. Then he gently held her face. Looking at the stream of tears on her face, his heart ached. He lowered his eyelashes, leaned closer to her, and gently kissed away the tears on her face. The intimacy between a mother and son was natural. No one could surpass the bond between her and Yu. This had nothing to do with favoritism. During her most difficult time, she and Yu depended on each other. The two of them were each other's strongest support and reliance. This bond was something that even Gong Jia couldn't surpass. The others also arrived one after another. Mu Yaja and Xiaoichen were the first to arrive, followed by Gong Jia and Hua Jin. When Xiaoichen saw Yoon Shirshir and Yu hugging each other tightly, he was deeply touched. It wasn't envy or jealousy, but an inexplicable sadness in his heart. If he really wanted to say that he was envious, he was probably envious of this bond. Xiaoichen was also affected by their emotions. His eyes reddened as he held Mu Yaja's hand tightly. Mu Yaja sensed the change in his emotions. He lowered his head and glanced at him, only to see him staring in the direction of Yoon Shirshir and Xiaoichen. The man smiled and put his arm around Xiaoichen's shoulders, patting him gently. "Aren't you going to hug Mommy and brother?" His reminder also seemed like encouragement. Originally, Xiaoichen felt extremely guilty because he had doubted Yu and Gong Fan previously. Now he looked at them and felt touched, but he didn't dare to go forward for fear of being ostracized by Yu. Mu Yaja obviously knew what he was thinking. When they were at the hospital, Xiaoichen thought that Gong Fan had stabbed his mommy. He was extremely agitated and even said a lot of outrageous things. He was extremely upset. He shouldn't have doubted his brother. Because of this, he felt very regretful and didn't dare to take that step no matter what. After Mu Yaja's encouragement, he finally mustered up his courage. He clenched his fists and walked to Yu's bed. "Yu." He called his name in a deep voice. Yu heard his voice and turned around. When he saw that it was Xiaoichen, he couldn't help but smile. Brother, her soft brother, made little Ichen feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. Chapter 4390. Amused, Yu tugged at his hand. Of all people, this was a sore spot. "No way. Are you crying?" "No." Xiaoichen stubbornly denied it, but everyone could hear the hoarseness in his voice as he choked on his sobs. In front of Yu as an older brother, he still had some dignity and did not cry easily. Now that his eyes were red, naturally, he did not want Yu to see it. Yu did not stand on ceremony and gently tugged at Xiaoqin's sleeve again. Hey, brother. Xiaoqin called him brother again. This time it hit the weakest spot in Xiaoqin's heart. Brother, I missed you. How about you? Did you miss me? Xiaoqin lowered his head and laughed. I missed you. Then, Yu was full of anticipation. Aren't you going to hug me? Xiaoqin turned around and finally looked at him. Yu looked at his red eyes and said angrily, Why are you crying? I'm not missing an arm or a leg. Aren't I fine? Xiaoqin could no longer hold back and hugged Xiaoqin tightly. Yun Shirshir looked at them with gratification. The reunion of the two brothers caused everyone present to sigh with emotion. Gong Jie too was deeply affected by this. Feeling touched, he stepped forward and was about to reach out to hug the two brothers when Yu raised his head, only to be met with a familiar cold face. Go away. Gong Jie's touched expression froze. The touched feeling in his heart was immediately replaced by embarrassment. Gong Jie was furious. He had been so touched by the touching brotherly love just now. In the end, with just one sentence from Yu, he was struck by lightning. Hey! Gong Jie's face was full of resentment. Can't I hug you even if I want to? He even said that he was touched. What a heartless guy. No, go away. Gong Jie became even more suspicious. When did uncle offend you? Do you have to target me like this? Puchi. Xiao Jie, did you do something to offend Yu or Gong Fan? Otherwise, why would he be so against you? Hearing Yun Shirshir's question, Gong Jie really thought about it carefully, but he couldn't figure out how he had offended this little nephew. He shook his head blankly. Hua Jin said, Looks like you must have offended Yu by accident. Otherwise, why would she target you and no one else? Gong Jie said angrily, You heartless bastard. Why don't you think about it? Uncle has worked so hard to support your little lover. Little lover. Everyone turned pale with fright. These words were undoubtedly like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. Alice had just arrived with Natalia. Hearing that, she was caught unprepared and burst into laughter. Ha ha. Yu's face instantly turned red when he heard this. What are you talking about? Yun Shirshir's interest was piqued. Little lover? What little lover? Gong Jie obviously didn't know that Alice had arrived with Natalia. He said in all seriousness, Sis, you don't know. Back then, it was this good son of yours who cried and begged me to adopt Natalia. Even a ghost could tell that this guy was up to no good. Yun Shirshir heard this and opened her mouth in surprise. No way. Yu is still so young. How can he know all this? How can he have his first awakening of love so early? Children these days are all mature early. Yu retorted unhappily. When did I cry and beg? Who was the one who cried and begged me to adopt her? Chapter 4391. Still trying to deny it? Gong Jie snorted coldly. Uncle worked so hard to raise your childhood sweetheart. But you don't appreciate it at all. You even dissed Uncle. Where's your conscience? Yu immediately explained to Yun Shirshir. I just felt that Natalia was staying in such a cold and empty hospital. So I felt sorry for her and wanted to help her find a home. Uncle, you're thinking about things you shouldn't be thinking about. Damn pervert. Gong Jie was furious. Who are you calling a damn pervert? Yu rolled his eyes arrogantly. I'm talking about you. Damn pervert. You. Gong Jie pushed Yun Shirshir and Xiaoqin away and rolled up his sleeves. Fine, fine. Yu, we're not done. With that said, Gong Jie angrily reached out to pull Yu's face. Yu's face was very delicate and couldn't withstand his pulling. His face was twisted out of shape by the pulling. Xiaoqin held back his laughter and pretended to persuade Yu. Uncle, don't bully Yu. Be careful not to damage his face. I'll take responsibility if it damages his face. Yu didn't cry out in pain. He stretched out his hand and wanted to pull Gong Jie's face back. However, Gong Jie's hand was much longer than his. It was easy for him to pull Yu's face, but Yu couldn't grab his face. Yu was flustered and exasperated. Gong Jie. The little guy was so angry that he called out his name. One could imagine how angry he was. Gong Jia was even more amused. He didn't intend to let go. Who told you to call me a damn pervert? I'll give you a chance. Call me uncle and I'll let you go. In your dreams. Then I won't hold back. With that said, Gong Jia exerted more force. Ha ha ha. Everyone was tickled by this. Even Natalia couldn't help but laugh at this scene. Yu had sharp ears and immediately heard her laugh. She turned to look at her and was caught off guard when she saw that she had also come. Let go. He glared fiercely at Gong Jia as if warning him. Gong Jia also heard that Natalia was coming and immediately sent her away. The uncle and nephew looked at the main character awkwardly. Alright, stop messing around. Yun Shirshir advised from the side and clapped her hands. Today is a day worth celebrating. Why don't we think of a way to celebrate? When Gong Jia heard Yun Shirshir's words, he also felt that it was a good idea. Uncle, how do you plan to celebrate? Why don't we have a barbecue at the beach? Gong Jia has a collection of rare and precious wines in his wine cellar. Let's take them out today and have a taste. Gong Jia's face was full of regret after being betrayed by Alice. No, those wines are all antiques. No way. Antiques. Muyaja's interest was piqued and he glanced at his brother-in-law. Alice immediately reminded him. It said that he has a bottle of sherry wine from 1775. This wine is very rare and priceless in today's market. Some people will sell it at high prices, but it's all fake. Xiao Jie's bottle of sherry wine, however, is the real deal. When he brought it back, the fragrance was unique. Muyaja was in high spirits. Looks like we're in for a treat today. Gong Jia snorted coldly. Don't even think about it. This wine is for me to taste in the future. Don't even think about coveting it. Yun Shirshir felt wronged and said, Sherry wine from 1775. I've heard of it, but I've never seen it before. Xiao Jia, why don't you take it out and let me see it? Gong Jia was speechless. Chapter 4392. Gong Jia said fiercely, If you want to loot my wine cellar, you'll have to do it over my dead body. 2 hours later. It was dusk by the beach and the waves were rolling. There was barbecue and champagne on the table. On the other side of the table were the hidden wines that Yun Shirshir and Muyaja had looted from Gong Jia's wine cellar. Gong Jia sat weakly on the beach chair as if he was paralyzed. His eyes were empty and he looked as if he had nothing left to live for. Yu and Xiaoichen looked at him with heartache, but they didn't know how to comfort him. Yu sighed. So pitiful. Xiaoichen nodded. Yes, very pitiful. If I hadn't heard from Alice, I wouldn't have known that uncle was so rich. Sherry wine from 1775? Pop! Muyaja opened the cork of the sherry wine. The captivating aroma was carried by the sea breeze to Gong Jia. Gong Jia turned his head and looked at the sherry wine that he had hidden for so long in Muyaja's hand. His heart ached so much that he almost couldn't breathe. My sherry. Men don't cry easily. However, at this moment, Gong Jia couldn't help but tear up. He had never been in a relationship before, so he didn't know what it felt like to be heartbroken. It was probably as painful as he was now. He was heartbroken. Here comes the main event. Alice held the wine glass and happily went over to Muyaja. She poured half a glass of wine, but she couldn't bear to drink it. If she drank it, it would cost more than tens of thousands of US dollars. This sherry wine was Gong Jia's heart, Gong Jia's liver, and Gong Jia's spleen, lungs, and kidneys. At the thought of this, Alice was strangely excited. It was very difficult for her to take advantage of Gong Jia. Alice walked up to Gong Jia. Seeing that he was still gloomy, she raised her eyebrows as if to provoke him. Xiao Jia, aren't you going to have a drink? There were a total of 2 bottles of sherry wine, but with so many people, each person only had 1 glass, and 1 bottle was soon empty. Gong Jia glared at her. Are you very pleased with yourself? To be able to taste sherry wine while I'm still alive, of course I'm proud. Alice raised her goblet and smiled obnoxiously. There's an old saying, enjoy life to the fullest. What a great saying. Enjoy life to the fullest. Gong Jia gritted his teeth and stood up from the recliner. Everyone was drinking. Wouldn't it be a pity if he didn't drink after saving him? No way. He wanted to drink and he had to fight for it. This was his wine and he had to drink it sooner or later. If he drank too much, he would end up in his stomach, lest others covet it. After thinking it through, Gong Jie walked to Mu Yaja's side. However, he saw that Hua Jin was also leaning against him, holding a goblet. After drinking 2 glasses, he felt that the wine was too delicious, so he came over for a 3rd glass. The second bottle of sherry wine was opened, and half of it was already gone. Gong Jie was furious when he saw this. Feeling that there was something scary behind him, Hua Jin turned around, only to see Gong Jie glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. He burped in fright. "Who allowed you to drink so much?" Gong Jie vented his anger on him. Hua Jin pouted, feeling wronged. "I didn't drink that much. Even if it was the 3rd glass, half a glass, it wouldn't be much." Gong Jie's eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. "Enough is enough, all of you. Ha ha ha." Yun Shishir looked at Gong Jie's distressed expression, and for some reason she was amused. Chapter 4393. Gong Jie got even angrier. "Is it that funny? Xiao Jie, is this wine your lifeline?" Yun Shishir asked with a pout. Gong Jie said matter-of-factly, "Of course. This wine is my lifeline." "So you're saying that this wine is more important than me?" Yun Shishir was so cunning that she had completely forgotten about him. Gong Jie disagreed. "How is that possible? Of course you're more important. Then I want you to share this wine with everyone. You've already drunk it, yet you're still pulling a long face. If you don't drink to your heart's content, won't it lose its value?" Gong Jie was speechless. She made so much sense that he couldn't refute her. "That's enough." Yun Shishir walked over and patted his shoulder gently. She handed him the wine glass. "Drink. It's rare that we're so happy today. It's a day worth celebrating. Don't look so sad, okay?" For Yun Shishir's sake, Gong Jie's anger dissipated quickly. He took the wine glass silently and took a sip. Hua Jin, who was beside him, immediately moved away from him, trembling in fear. No matter what, he had to stay away from this demon king. "Mommy, I want a drink too." Xiaoichen suddenly ran over. He held the wine glass and stared at the Shirley wine. Yun Shishir said, "No, children can't drink. It's just red wine. It doesn't matter. Besides, every bottle of Shirley wine I drink is 1 less bottle. When I grow up, I won't even have the chance to drink it." That was heart-wrenching. This sentence undoubtedly dealt another heavy blow to Gong Jie. That's right. The more he drank, the less he would drink because it was limited. He wouldn't have the chance to drink it again in the future. Yun Shishir couldn't persuade Xiaoichen and could only pour half a glass for him. Seeing that Xiaoichen was drinking, Yu craved the wine as well. She brought the wine glass to Yun Shishir and asked for half a glass. "Cheers! Cheers!" Ding! Ding sounds were heard. Several people raised their goblets and toasted. Yun Shishir walked up to Gong Jie and winked mischievously. "Come, Xiao Jie. Cheers!" For some reason, when he saw Yun Shishir's gentle smile, the haze in his heart was instantly swept away. He gladly raised his goblet and clinked it with hers. "Cheers! I'll do it. You can do whatever you want." Yun Shishir seemed to be in high spirits, so she drank all the wine in the cup in one go. With a smile on his lips, Gong Jie downed the wine in his glass in one gulp. One must enjoy life to the fullest. Cherishing every day. Cherishing every moment. This was the profound meaning of happiness. Gong Jie raised his wine glass and looked at the moon in the sky through the transparent crystal glass. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his gaze became blurry. It was as if his soul had been drawn away. The sea breeze blew gently, making one feel comfortable. Yun Shishir was soon half drunk. Alice, Hua Jin, and Natalia surrounded the barbecue and spared no effort in grilling scallops. Hua Jin didn't have much experience, but Alice had always been by the sea. Thus, she had many tricks for grilling scallops and oysters. After a while, an enticing aroma filled the air with the sea breeze. "It smells so good." A few gluttonous people walked over when they smelled the aroma. Alice placed the grilled scallops and oysters on a plate and sprinkled some seasoning. It was comparable to a barbecue feast at a 5-star restaurant. "Those who don't know better would think that you're a 5-star chef," Hua Jin said quietly. Chapter 4394. When Alice heard this, she did not think much of it. "Why? The chefs on the island roast better than me. I learned it secretly. The seaside is so nice." Hua Jin sighed from the bottom of his heart. Alice was a little surprised when she heard this. Why do you suddenly have such a sigh? Because the seaside is so beautiful. Don't you think so? During the day you can swim and dive in the sea. At night you can sit quietly by the sea, enjoy the sea breeze and eat seafood. It's the most comfortable feeling in life. Shallow. Alice gave a pertinent evaluation. Why do you say that? Living by the sea actually has many advantages. For example, the sea view is very beautiful. There is very little noise by the sea. You can swim every day. There are many minerals in the sea that can improve your skin and improve your physical fitness. The air is also very fresh. However, the sea breeze always carries a fishy smell. In addition, there are many problems with humidity by the sea. For example, clothes are always easy to get wet. The railings of the doors and windows are easy to corrode. Moreover, it's easy to get rheumatism. If you encounter a typhoon or a tsunami, living by the sea is simply a disaster. Hua Jin was slightly stunned. He seemed to have really not thought of these problems. So there are many sides to every problem. Life is never perfect. It is always accompanied by all kinds of regrets. Yes. However, there are happiness and regrets. This is life. Perfect. Don't you feel that it's boring? Alice raised her wine glass and gently swirled the wine in the glass with a deep smile. Life is to experience all kinds of ups and downs. This is the greatest meaning of life. However, this is what I think. Everyone's values are different. Perhaps others will not agree. I think I will agree with your view. Hua Jin pursed his lips and smiled. There is absolutely no perfection in life. There is no doubt about this. If a person's life is too smooth, that would be unbelievable. Grasp every regret and cherish every happiness. Well said. Hua Jin raised his wine glass. To your chicken soup for the soul. Cheers. Alice drank the wine in one gulp. Yu suddenly muttered. What are you guys talking about? The scallops are about to win. Alice looked at her own barbecue grill. Sure enough, the scallop meat was trembling and making a slightly charred sound. Haha. This is also one of the regrets of my life. Hua Jin put the burnt scallop aside. A burnt scallop is an imperfection in life. Alice smiled knowingly. Not far away, Gong Jia was lying on a recliner, watching this harmonious scene, especially when he saw Hua Jin and Alice talking and laughing. He didn't know why, but he felt a little irritated. The two of them seemed to be getting along quite well. Could it be that Hua Jin was interested in Alice? Thinking of this possibility, Gong Jia felt a strange sense of crisis. Even he himself did not understand why he had such an inexplicable feeling. At night, after the party was over, Hua Jin walked back to his room. In the corridor, he unexpectedly bumped into Gong Jia. He leaned against the door of his room with his arms crossed, as if waiting for someone. Hua Jin couldn't help but feel strange. It's so late. Why aren't you going back to your room to rest? Chapter 4395. It can't be. You're drunk? Hua Jin sniffed and looked up, but his eyes met with Gong Jia's deep gaze. He got a shock and deliberately distanced himself from Gong Jia. Gong Jia couldn't help but tease him. Am I so scary that you want to keep your distance from me? Drunk people like to find fault with him. Of course he had to keep his distance. Besides, Gong Jia was so violent. What if he got drunk and lost control and beat him up? Hua Jin looked at him anxiously. Calm down. How am I not calm down? Then since you're drunk, you should go back to your room and rest. How can you tell that I'm drunk? I can tell from how much you talk. However, Hua Jin only dared to say that in his heart. If he said that in front of Gong Jia, wouldn't he be courting death? You like Alice? Gong Jia's sudden question made Hua Jin stunned. What? Alice is such a scary woman. In the room, Alice had just finished bathing. She came out in a bathrobe and sneezed loudly. Who's talking bad about me? She muttered to herself as she walked towards the bed. What's scary? Do you know what her biggest interest is? Hua Jin's curiosity was piqued at once. What is it? Dissection. She especially likes to study the human body structure. She has dissected countless corpses. When she used to eat steak, she dissected it with a scalpel. Wretch. Hua Jin couldn't take it anymore and almost vomited. I'm not interested in Alice. Gong Jie raised an eyebrow and looked at her from the corner of his eyes. Then why did you chat with her for so long? He knew it now. This Gong Jie must be secretly in love with Alice. So seeing that Alice chatted with him for so long, he was a little jealous. At this moment they wouldn't come to denounce him, would they? Don't worry, I won't fight with you, Hua Jin promised him solemnly. This time it was Gong Jie's turn to be confused. What did he mean by that? Not competing with him? Snatch what? Don't worry, I will keep a distance from Alice in the future. Hua Jin gave another guarantee. When Gong Jie heard this, he felt satisfied. Rest early. After Gong Jie finished speaking, he leisurely went back. Hua Jin looked at Gong Jie's departing back with a face full of question marks. He was suddenly at a loss. What a weirdo. Hua Jin entered the room and recalled Gong Jie's unfathomable expression. The more he thought about it, the stranger he felt. After recuperating at sea for a few days, Yun Shishir's wound healed very quickly. She told Muyaja that she wanted to stay on the island for a few more days. Coincidentally, Yu and Xiaochen also wanted to stay on the island for a few more days. However, there were still many matters piled up in the Xingyu Financial Group, waiting for him to deal with. Hence, Muyaja chartered a plane to return to the country first. His time on the island was equivalent to a vacation. Yun Shishir knew that Gong Xiaoying was also on this island. However, perhaps he was worried about her, or perhaps he was afraid that Yun Shishir would not want to face him, so he did not appear in front of her. Yun Shishir knew in her heart that Gong Xiaoying was avoiding her. However, she also understood that he was avoiding her for her sake. He did not want to embarrass her. On this day, Yun Shishir suddenly said to Gong Jie, I want to see him. Him. Chapter 4396. Why do you want to see father all of a sudden? Gong Jie was pleasantly surprised. He held Yun Shishir's shoulders in disbelief and asked, Have you decided to forgive father? Yun Shishir did not answer. Instead, she looked deeply at Gong Jie. The relationship between him and me is very complicated. However, I had secretly promised that if Yu was safe and sound, I would choose to let go of everything and not bear any grudges. Now that Yu is really safe and sound, perhaps even God is guiding me to forgive him. You? Gong Jie was comforted and asked, Don't you hate him anymore? Of course I do. How can I not hate him? As Yun Shishir spoke, she sighed and turned to look at the boundless sea. She smiled and said, I admit that I was too vicious in the past. At that time I blamed all my misfortunes on him. Actually, she understood. All the fortune and misfortune in her life had been caused by that man. It was because of him that she had become an orphan. However, it was also because of him that she had become entangled with the Mu family. Everything that had happened after that, including the entanglement between her and Muyaja, was also because of him. However, all the misfortunes had made her hate him. However, she had not been grateful to him for all the good things that had happened. She wanted to punish him with such unfairness. However, in reality they were the ones to be punished in the end. There was no winner or loser between the two of them. She had decided to let go of all her grudges. It could be considered as doing it for her family. It was not good to be too vicious in her body and in her heart. Muyaja was also aware of her decision. She had already told him in advance and asked for his opinion. What opinion could Muyaja have? After all, Gong Xiaoying was her father, her biological father. Blood was thicker than water. There were some things that could not be severed in this lifetime. Muyaja still had some opinions about this father-in-law of his. His own son had been cheated by his grandfather, and he had been cheated so miserably. As a son-in-law, no matter how much he tolerated it, he still had a sense of propriety. However, when Yun Shishir told him that she had decided to forgive Gong Xiaoying and asked for his opinion, Muyaja said, This is a grudge between you and your father. It's not appropriate for me to get involved. However, no matter what decision you make, I will support you. Therefore, Muyaja left Darkwind Island in advance and returned to the country. He wanted to leave Yun Shishir and Gong Xiaoying behind to deal with this matter. Gong Jie said, If you really want to see him, I can arrange it for you right away. There's no need for that. Where is he? I'll go see him. Gong Jie was very surprised by her initiative and nodded his head as well. He made a phone call. Jed, where's my father now? Zephyr Island is huge. On the huge island, many corners were filled with cameras. Jed was the designer in charge of security. No matter who the culprit was, as long as he called him, he would be able to find them immediately. Master is in the castle. He reported Gong Xiaoying's location and did not ask too much. Gong Xiaoying brought Yun Shishir to the castle. After entering the castle, Gong Jie first brought Yun Shishir to the living room. Then he went to the study on the third floor to look for Gong Xiaoying. In the study, Gong Xiaoying was staring at the photo on the table in a daze. In the photo was a family photo of Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. Gong Jie was also in the photo and even Hua Jin was in it. However, he was not in it. This family photo was brought back by Gong Jie. Chapter 4397. He specially printed an extra photo and gave it to Gong Xiaoying. From then on, this photo replaced Mu Qingqing's photo in a photo frame and was placed on the desk. This was a place where he often saw it. Every time he felt tired, he would hold the photo and look at it for a while. His fingers caressed Yun Shishir's face, Yu Yu's face, Xiaoichen's face, Yu Yao's face. This was a concern that he could not let go of no matter what. Other than that, he did not have any other thoughts. Originally, he was very obsessed with acknowledging Yun Shishir. He wanted to acknowledge her as father and daughter. Even if he had to resort to unscrupulous means, he would not give up until he achieved his goal. However, when he saw the series of pain that his decision had brought to Yun Shishir, it was impossible for him not to be upset. He realized how selfish his thoughts were. It was because of his selfishness that Mu Qingqing did not pick him up at the last moment. It was because of his selfishness that the daughter he cared about the most, who had been homeless for so many years, he had repeatedly hurt her because of his ignorance. He finally figured it out. Acknowledging her as father was not worth mentioning compared to his daughter living a good and happy life. Therefore, Gong Xiaoying did not ask for anything. As long as Yun Shishir could live a good and peaceful life, he did not ask for anything else. He did not expect to be forgiven. Although, if Yun Shishir would never forgive him for the rest of her life, perhaps this would become a heavier regret than Mu Qingqing. However, this was his own doing and he could not blame others. Even if Yun Shishir really did not forgive him, it was only right. He did not force anything. He was staring at the family photo in a daze when a voice suddenly came from beside him. "Father!" Gong Jie's sudden voice startled him. Gong Xiaoying looked up in surprise. When he saw Gong Jie pushing the door open and walking in, he immediately became serious. "Why did you come in without knocking?" Gong Jie said confidently. "I knocked on the door." "Are you deaf?" Gong Xiaoying was speechless. This kid was really becoming more and more impudent. In the past, she had always been well behaved in front of him. Gong Xiaoying awkwardly put the family portrait back to its original position. He cleared his throat and asked, "Your sister, did she leave?" "No." "Oh? How long does she intend to stay on the island?" When Gong Jie heard this, he was a little suspicious. "Father, are you chasing her away?" "Cough." Gong Xiaoying glared at him awkwardly. "Why would I chase her away? It doesn't matter how long she stays on the island. He could afford to raise her for the rest of her life. He could even support the Xingyu financial group behind Mu Yaja, let alone Yun Shishir." Gong Xiaoying pretended not to care and said, "If she likes it here, then let her stay for a while. The scenery here is good. It's not bad as a vacation spot." Gong Xiaoying introduced the island as if he was introducing a vacation spot. He pretended to casually ask her to stay, which made Gong Jie not know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, he felt a little sorry for her. Gong Xiaoying could not appear, but as a father, he definitely hoped that Yun Shishir would stay on the island for a few more days. This feeling was like knowing that his daughter was on the island. Although he could not see her, he felt inexplicably at ease. After the age of 50, Gong Xiaoying had this feeling. Some people, once you met them, you would not see them again. Life was long and counting down. Chapter 4398. There were too many regrets in his life. As time passed, he cherished this little happiness even more. There was a sense of security because she was by his side. Even if he couldn't see her, it didn't matter. Gong Xiaoying couldn't show too much concern and could only ask Gong Jie indirectly. "Does she like this place? Is she used to living here? Sometimes the sea breeze is strong and the waves are strong. As a man, you should protect your sister well. Gong Xiaoying asked one question after another, all of which were details. When Gong Jie heard this, he actually had the urge to cry. Gong Xiaoying had never shown this side of him before. He carefully tried to find out news about her from him. He wanted to give her the best and wanted her to stay on the island for one more day. That kind of cautious feeling was as if he would feel annoyed if she didn't like the small details. He was a devoted father who wanted to give her the best from the bottom of his heart. Why don't you ask her yourself? Ask her. Gong Xiaoying smiled helplessly. She hates me so much. How can I appear in front of her? As a father, I'm not qualified. As her younger brother, you can't wrong her. Do you understand? Father, you don't have to give orders like an officer. If she doesn't forgive you, are you going to hide from her forever? Gong Xiaoying was unhappy. When did I hide from her? Otherwise, why didn't you see her when she was on the island for so long? Gong Xiaoying was a little angry. So what if I see her? At that time, she was worried about you, and I didn't dare to disturb her. Moreover, the person she didn't want to see the most was me. What if I suddenly saw her and she ran away in anger? So you're like a coward, locking yourself in the study and secretly looking at the family photos. Gong Jie's words were not pleasant to the ears. Gong Xiaoying was unhappy because of this. Your tone today is very problematic. What do you want to do? Provoke me? I'm just here to tell you. Gong Jie bent down and stared into his eyes. If she wants to see you, will you see her? Gong Xiaoying was stunned when he heard this. She wants to see me? Yes. When Gong Xiaoying heard this, he immediately disagreed. How is that possible? Who are you trying to fool by saying this? Why would she want to see me? What good would it do me to lie to you? Gong Jie shrugged innocently. Besides, she's downstairs. You'll know whether I'm lying to you or not. Or are you afraid to go? Gong Xiaoying was stunned. He asked in a roundabout way, why does she want to see me? You have to ask yourself this question. It's not good for me to interfere in the matters between you and your father. After Gong Jie finished speaking, he raised his wrist and looked at his watch. She said she's willing to wait for you for 30 minutes. If you don't want to see her, she won't wait. Father, it's up to you. After saying this, Gong Jie walked away leisurely. Gong Xiaoying glared at his back view and said angrily, this little rascal, he has no respect for his elders. Following this, Gong Xiaoying actually didn't have the confidence to tell her that Yun Shishir wanted to see him. He didn't know why she wanted to see him. Could it be that he had been discovered secretly watching her through the surveillance camera? Chapter 4399. Other than that, what else could it be? Gong Xiaoying couldn't think of anything. He didn't dare to meet her rashly. He didn't know why, but he was actually very afraid of this daughter. His glass heart really couldn't afford to be hurt. If they met again, she would mock and ridicule him, and then make it clear that they would never see each other again. Then where should he put the glass shards on the ground? But he couldn't accept not meeting her. At that time, Gong Jie would definitely mock him for being a coward. He thought it through. Gong Xiaoying decided to meet her. He changed his clothes and solemnly tidied up his appearance, as if he was going to an important negotiation. The next time they met, he must leave a good impression on his daughter. This was a father carefully trying to protect his dignity, and at the same time, he wanted to leave a perfect image in front of his beloved daughter. Even if he was prepared for the worst, he also hoped that in the worst-case scenario, he could leave a place in Yun Shishir's heart. Gong Xiaoying tidied himself up and went out, only to find that 30 minutes had passed. Gong Jie said that Yun Shishir was in the living room. He walked towards the living room with his walking stick, almost without grace. When he walked into the living room, he didn't find anyone there. Gong Xiaoying looked around but didn't see anyone. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. 30 minutes had passed. That person had probably already left. She had given him 30 minutes of grace. He wasn't willing to wait for another minute. Gong Xiaoying was a little annoyed with himself for wasting so much time on his appearance. He couldn't help but feel a little depressed that she wasn't around. Gong Xiaoying sighed, turned around and was about to leave. But Yun Shishir's gentle voice suddenly came from behind him. Since you're already here, why don't you sit for a while? Gong Xiaoying's back stiffened. He turned around in surprise and saw Yun Shirshir coming out of the bathroom. She was wiping her hands with a towel while looking at him calmly. Just now, the reason why he didn't see her at first glance was because she went to the bathroom to wash her hands. When she walked out, she saw that he was about to leave. She was a little surprised. Just now. I didn't see you. I thought you had already left. Facing her like this, he seemed a little embarrassed and nervous, so much so that his words were not as swift and decisive as before. In the past, no matter who he faced, he always had a feeling of superiority. Even when facing her, it was the same. Knowing that she was still alive when he went to see her, he wanted to give her the dignity and aura of a father. But that was just how people were. It was just that he had lost it once and did not know how to cherish it. Now he didn't even care about Grace. Just speaking carefully in front of her was enough to make her tremble with fear. Are you not going to sit? I brewed some tea and it's getting cold now. Yun Shirshir took the lead and sat down on the sofa. She had already brewed a pot of tea on the coffee table. There are many good teas on the island. I've never seen some of them before. Using this topic, Gong Xiaoying broke the deadlock. Do you like black tea or green tea? Whether it's black tea or green tea, I don't refuse any. But compared to green tea, I prefer black tea. Especially in winter, when I brew a cup of Jinjun Mei and Chimen tea, I feel my body warming up. I like black tea too. I heard from Xiaojie that you actually like coffee the most. Chapter 4400. Yun Shirshir said. Like my mother, she loved coffee too. However, at that time, coffee was too expensive, so she would often brew flower tea to drink. Flower tea? Yeah. It was rare for Yun Shirshir to talk about their childhood with Gong Xiaoying. When I was young, I still remember the place where we lived. It was very small and simple. It was a typical old, run-down, and small neighborhood with only one bedroom and one living room. The place wasn't big. A monthly rent of 300 to 100 yuan was very expensive at that time. Although the living room and bedroom were very big, because there were 3 of us, my mother placed a small bed in the living room to train Xiaojie's independence. My mother and I slept in the bedroom. The kitchen wasn't big and the bathroom was small. When I was young, I could only squeeze in the bathtub with Xiaojie. When I was young, my health wasn't very good and I often caught colds from the cold. However, although the house was small, the garden that came with it was very big. Garden? Yun Shirshir nodded. Yeah. I remember that when we first moved in, the garden was already abandoned. Although it's called a garden, it's actually just a flower bed surrounded by weeds and withered leaves. Mom was very satisfied when she saw the flower bed. Although 300 yuan is very expensive, she still bought it without hesitation. Gong Xiaoying said, your mother liked flowers and plants very much. Yeah, she was especially particular about them. After moving in, she spent a day tidying up the house and another day taking care of the flower bed. Oh. Following Yun Shirshir's description, Gong Xiaoying's heart calmed down. He couldn't help but imagine the layout of the house where the 3 of them rented and that small but warm little garden. My mother was very tired every day. Because she had to take care of us, it was inconvenient for her to go to work at the factory. Moreover, at that time the Mu family was looking for her everywhere, so she was afraid. Therefore, she hid at home, washing clothes, sewing clothes, and taking care of the children. Sometimes she would take some odd jobs back home. At the mention of Mu Qingcheng, many memories flew in Yun Shirshir's mind. Those memories were like a revolving lantern, appearing in her mind scene by scene. Even after so many years, she still couldn't forget Mu Qingcheng's voice and appearance. Her every frown and smile made her yearn for her very much. Gong Xiaoying asked, what kind of odd jobs? The kind of assembly of small parts. She gets paid according to the number of parts she made. Costs 50 cents to make one. Every day, her mother would make 100. Although she could make 50 yuan a day, it was really tiring. It's really tiring. When Gong Xiaoying heard this, he frowned slightly and fell into deep thought. 50 yuan at that time, to him it was probably just a dessert. However, Mom was very optimistic. She didn't make a fuss, no matter how tired she was. Sometimes, when she couldn't get any work, she would happily go to the back garden to take care of her flowers and plants. But most of the time she liked to sit by the window and look out. But we really don't know what she's looking at. Later I found out. She was waiting for someone by the window. She was like a stubborn soldier. Even if she was wounded and exhausted, she still held her sword and held on to the last lonely city.